The CEO who built empires with ice in her veins was dying on a hospital floor, and the only person who could save her was a man she would have never looked twice at. A single father in a security guard's uniform, carrying more medals than she had awards, more scars than she had stories. He had 20 minutes to stop the bleeding. She had seconds to realize that power means nothing when you're the one begging for help. This is their story. Stay until the end and comment your city so I can see how far this journey reaches. The fluorescent lights of Mercy Heights Hospital flickered like dying stars against the midnight sky, casting long shadows down corridors that smelled of antiseptic and silent prayers. It was the kind of quiet that preceded catastrophe, the held breath before the scream, the stillness before the storm breaks. Then the emergency doors exploded inward with a violence that shattered the peace. Trauma incoming! ETA 30 seconds! The dispatch crackled through the intercom system, sending nurses scrambling from their stations. Coffee cups were abandoned mid-sip, paperwork scattered across desks. The machinery of emergency medicine lurched into motion with practiced urgency, but tonight there was a problem. A critical, potentially fatal problem. Dr. Marcus Webb, the only attending surgeon on duty, was currently 3 floors up, elbow deep in an emergency appendectomy that had gone sideways. The resident who should have been backing him up had called in sick. The on-call physician was stuck in traffic, still 20 minutes out. The ER was effectively without a doctor. Nurse Patricia Chen, a 20-year veteran with steel in her spine and exhaustion carved into the lines around her eyes, grabbed her radio with hands that wanted to shake but didn't dare. We need a physician to ER stat. Critical incoming, massive trauma. The ambulance screamed into the bay before she could finish. Through the glass doors, she could see paramedics moving with the controlled chaos that meant one thing. Someone was dying, and dying fast. The doors burst open. The stretcher wheels hit the linoleum with a sound like thunder, and Patricia Chen's breath caught in her throat. The woman on the gurney was barely recognizable as human. Blood soaked through hastily applied bandages, turning white gauze into crimson flowers of trauma. Her designer suit, what remained of it, was shredded like paper, revealing lacerations that mapped a story of metal and velocity and impact. Her face was the color of ash, lips blue-tinged, eyes rolling back in a skull that had kissed death and lived to tell about it. But it was the face itself that made Patricia's stomach drop. She knew that face. Everyone in the city knew that face. Ariana Locke, CEO of Lockwire Technologies, Forbes 30 under 30, the woman who'd revolutionized cybersecurity and made her first billion before 30. The face on magazine covers, the voice in TED Talks, the iron-willed entrepreneur who'd once told a room full of investors that she didn't believe in luck, only leverage. She was also, in this moment, approximately 6 minutes from bleeding out. Head-on collision with a semi, the lead paramedic rattled off, his voice mechanical with the detachment necessary for survival in this profession. Airbag deployed but steering column compromised. Chest trauma, possible internal bleeding, multiple lacerations. BP dropping, 80 over 40 and falling. We've got 2 IVs running wide open, but she's losing ground fast. Where's the doctor? Another paramedic demanded, looking around the ER with wild eyes. Patricia felt the weight of every person in that room turning to her. She opened her mouth to explain, to apologize, to somehow make sense of the senseless. And that's when Ariana Locke's eyes snapped open. They were gray, storm cloud gray, the kind of gray that had stared down boardrooms and dismantled competitors and built empires from nothing but will and wire. But now they were clouded with pain, swimming with tears, desperately human in a way that her public persona never allowed. Her lips moved. Blood bubbled at the corner of her mouth. Patricia leaned in close, her ear inches from Ariana's face. The words came out in a whisper that somehow contained more terror than any scream. Please, just make it fast. Make it, I don't want the pain. Time crystallized around those words. The ER seemed to hold its breath. This woman, this brilliant, powerful, seemingly invincible woman, wasn't asking to be saved. She was asking for mercy, asking to die quickly rather than slowly, asking for an end to the agony that was tearing her apart from the inside. Patricia's training screamed at her to say something comforting, something hopeful, something to keep the patient conscious and fighting, but the words stuck in her throat because the truth was unavoidable. Without a doctor, without someone who could stabilize her, Ariana Locke's request might be the only one they could grant. "Hold on," Patricia managed, her voice cracking. "Just hold on, sweetheart. We're going to—" "Ma'am, I need you to step back." The voice came from behind her, calm and deep, and carrying the kind of quiet authority that made people obey without question. Patricia turned, ready to snap at whoever was interrupting, ready to explain that unless they had an MD, they needed to clear the area. And stopped. Standing just inside the ER entrance, still in the shadows where the overhead lights didn't quite reach, was a man she'd seen 100 times but never really looked at. He wore the standard security uniform of Mercy Heights, navy blue shirt with the hospital logo, black pants, utility belt with radio and flashlight. The jacket was worn at the elbows, the boots scuffed from countless miles walking these halls. Caleb Shaw. Night shift security. Quiet guy. Kept to himself. Brought his daughter's drawings to work and taped them inside his locker. Smiled politely but never lingered to chat. Just another invisible cog in the massive machinery of the hospital, the kind of person you stopped noticing after the first week. Except he wasn't invisible now. He moved toward the gurney with a purposeful stride that parted the crowd like a ship through water. His eyes, dark brown, almost black in this light, were locked on Ariana with an intensity that made Patricia's professional instincts scream both warning and hope. "Sir, this is a restricted—" one of the paramedics started. Caleb was already at the gurney, hands hovering over Ariana's body, eyes scanning with a speed and precision that spoke of training far beyond what any security guard should possess. His fingers found her pulse point, pressed gently but firmly. His other hand went to her abdomen, palpating with a delicacy that seemed impossible from someone with hands that size. "Differential diagnosis," he said, voice steady as stone. "Blunt force trauma to the chest, possible pneumothorax, signs of internal hemorrhaging, likely splenic laceration. She's bleeding into her abdomen, that's why the BP won't stabilize. Peripheral cyanosis indicates inadequate perfusion. She's in hypovolemic shock." The ER went dead silent. That wasn't security guard talk, that was battlefield surgeon talk. Patricia found her voice. "Caleb, what are you—" "4 units O negative now," he said, already moving, fingers working to check Ariana's airway. "Get me a crash cart, intubation kit, and a thoracostomy tray. Someone page Dr. Webb and tell him we need an OR in 10 minutes or we're doing this on the floor." No one moved. They were too stunned. Caleb's head snapped up, and for just a second, Patricia saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. Not anger, but the kind of focused intensity that came from watching people die and deciding it wasn't going to happen again. Not on his watch. Not ever. "Move." The word cracked like a whip. "She's got 6 minutes, maybe less. Either help me or get out of my way, but make the choice now." Patricia moved. So did everyone else. Whatever this was, whatever Caleb Shaw was, it was their only shot. Hands flew. Orders were called. The crash cart screamed across the linoleum. Bags of blood appeared from the refrigerator, still cold to the touch. The thoracostomy tray, sterile instruments for emergency chest decompression, was ripped open with practiced efficiency. And through it all, Caleb worked. His hands moved with the kind of precision that came from muscle memory forged in hell. He assessed the chest wound, palpated for rib fractures, checked for the telltale signs of tension pneumothorax, a collapsed lung that could kill in minutes. Finding what he needed, he grabbed a scalpel from the tray, located the intercostal space between ribs, and made an incision so clean and confident that 2 nurses actually gasped. "Hemostat," he said. Someone slapped it into his palm. Finger sweep to clear the space and decompress. There was a hiss of air, the sound of pressure equalizing, of a lung reinflating, of death being pushed back one more step. Ariana's oxygen saturation ticked up 2 points on the monitor. Small victory, massive difference. But it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. Her blood pressure was still dropping. The internal bleeding hadn't stopped. It was just being temporarily outpaced by the transfusion. Without surgery, she'd be dead before dawn. "Talk to me about the abdomen," Caleb said, fingers probing gently. Ariana whimpered, the first sound she'd made since asking to die fast. Caleb's expression didn't change, but his free hand found hers and squeezed. I know it hurts, but I need you to stay with me. Can you do that? Ariana's eyes, which had been drifting closed, snapped to his face. She stared at him like she was trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense, trying to understand why this stranger was talking to her like he knew her, like he cared, like she mattered beyond the headlines and the stock prices. Who? She whispered. Who are you? Nobody important, Caleb said gently, still working, still assessing. But I'm not going to let you die. That's a promise. He pressed on her abdomen again, watching her face. The way she flinched told him everything he needed to know. Splenic injury, probable grade 3 or 4. Bleeding steady but not catastrophic. Survivable. Barely. Patricia, he said, not looking up. When Webb gets here, tell him possible splenic laceration with hemodynamic instability. She'll need a laparotomy, probably splenectomy if they can't salvage it. Keep the blood running. We need to stay ahead of the loss until he can get in there. Patricia nodded, too stunned to question how a security guard was dictating surgical strategy. Caleb looked down at Ariana again. Her grip on his hand was weakening, her eyes were glazing over. The body's natural response to blood loss, shutting down non-essential systems to preserve the core. She was fading. Hey, he said sharply. Look at me. Don't you dare check out on me now. Her eyes struggled to focus. Hurts, she whispered. So much. Just let me... No. The word was iron. I've seen too many people quit because the pain was too much. I watched friends, good people, strong people, slip away because they decided it wasn't worth the fight. But you know what? Every single one of them, if they could come back, would tell you the pain was temporary. Death is permanent. He reached up with his free hand, the one not checking her vitals, not maintaining pressure on her wounds, and did something that made every person in that ER inhale sharply. He took off his jacket, the worn, scuffed security jacket that marked him as just another hospital employee. He balled it up and placed it gently under Ariana's head, like a pillow, like she was something precious instead of a patient bleeding out on a Tuesday night. You asked me to make it fast, he said quietly, close enough that only she could hear. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make it slow. I'm going to fight for every second, every breath, every heartbeat, because that's what you deserve. Not a quick end, but a slow, stubborn, painful crawl back to life. Ariana's eyes filled with tears. Not from pain, from something deeper, something that had nothing to do with the trauma and everything to do with being seen. Really seen. Not as a CEO or a billionaire or a magazine cover, just as a human being who was scared and hurting and asking for someone to care. Why? She breathed. Caleb smiled. It was a sad smile, the kind that carried old grief and new hope in equal measure. Because someone did it for me once, and I'm still paying that debt forward. The ER doors burst open again. Dr. Marcus Webb rushed in, still in surgical scrubs, gloves half on, eyes wild with adrenaline and apology. What have we got? I came as fast as... He stopped, stared, took in the scene with the trained eye of a man who'd spent 20 years in emergency medicine. Ariana Locke, stable, breathing, color returning to her face, IVs running, chest decompressed, vitals holding steady at the razor edge of critical but manageable, a perfect emergency stabilization, and standing over her, hands steady and sure, was the night shift security guard. Jesus Christ, Webb breathed. Caleb, how did you... Later, Caleb said, already stepping back, already retreating into the shadows where people like him belonged. She's got a splenic lac, probable grade 3 or 4. Chest trauma is managed, but watch for reinflation. She needs surgery now. I've bought you maybe 20 minutes. He turned to leave. His job was done. He'd kept the promise. She'd lived to see sunrise. But Ariana's hand shot out, weak, trembling but determined, and caught his wrist. Wait, she gasped. Your name. I need your name. Caleb looked down at her. For a moment, something passed between them. An understanding, a connection, the kind of thing that happens when one human being saves another and both are forever changed by it. Just someone who was in the right place at the right time, he said gently, pulling free. Live well, ma'am. That's all the thanks I need. And then he was gone, disappearing into the hallways like a ghost, leaving behind only his jacket under her head and a room full of people trying to understand what they'd just witnessed. Dr. Webb moved in, taking command, calling orders, wheeling Ariana toward surgery. But as the gurney moved, Ariana's hand clutched the security jacket like a lifeline, and her lips formed two words that only Patricia Chen was close enough to hear. Thank you. Walk. The surgery took 4 hours. Caleb Shaw spent those 4 hours doing what he always did, walking the halls, checking doors, making small talk with the skeleton crew of janitors and night nurses who kept the hospital running while the world slept. He didn't mention what had happened in the ER, didn't brag or explain or even acknowledge it when a couple of nurses looked at him with new eyes, with questions forming on their lips. He just walked and thought and tried not to remember. Because the truth was, what he'd done tonight, the emergency trauma care, the battlefield medicine, the calm under pressure that seemed superhuman to everyone else, wasn't superhuman at all. It was just memory. Muscle memory. The kind of thing you learned when you spent 3 tours in desert combat zones, when you were the difference between soldiers going home in body bags or going home to their families. Staff Sergeant Caleb Shaw, United States Army. Combat medic. Silver Cross recipient. 23 confirmed saves under hostile fire. Honorably discharged 4 years ago after his wife's car accident, the one he couldn't save her from, the one that taught him the cruelest lesson. You can be trained to save the world and still be powerless to save the person you love most. He'd come home to an empty house and a daughter who'd lost her mother. Maddie, 8 years old now. Bright eyes and her mother's smile and a heart so big it terrified him sometimes. She was the reason he took this job. Steady hours, decent benefits, weekends off to be at her soccer games and school plays. It didn't matter that he was overqualified, that he could have gone back to school for his MD, that his army buddies thought he was wasting his potential. Maddie needed a dad. Not a hero, just a dad. So he put on the security uniform, walked the halls, and tried to be invisible. Until tonight. At 4:47 a.m., as the first hints of dawn started painting the sky outside the hospital windows, Caleb's radio crackled to life. Shaw, you there? Patricia's voice, tired but warm. He lifted the radio. Copy. What do you need? Your jacket. Miss Locke is asking for it. She's awake. Surgery went well, and she won't let anyone take it until you come get it. Caleb closed his eyes. He should have known, should have expected this. But part of him, the part that had learned to live in the shadows, to not expect recognition or thanks, had hoped she'd just forget. Move on. Let him disappear back into obscurity. On my way, he said. Tokem. The recovery room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of monitors tracking vitals that were finally, blessedly, stable. Ariana Locke lay in the bed looking impossibly small. Not the titan of industry, not the fierce CEO, just a woman who'd looked death in the eyes and lived to tell about it. She was awake. Barely. Pain meds made her eyes heavy, but they tracked to Caleb the moment he stepped through the door. She was still holding his jacket. Hi, Caleb said quietly, staying near the door. I'm told you have something of mine. Ariana tried to sit up, winced, gave up. Her voice came out scratchy from the intubation. You saved my life. Dr. Webb saved your life. I just kept you alive long enough for him to do the real work. Don't. The word was sharp despite her weakness. Don't diminish what you did. I've built companies. I know what decisive action looks like. You didn't hesitate. Didn't wait. Didn't let anyone tell you it wasn't your job. She paused. Why? Caleb shrugged. Because you needed help. That's enough. But you're security. You're not a doctor. You could have been sued, fired, arrested for practicing medicine without a license. You risked everything. Not everything. Caleb smiled slightly. Everything would have been watching you die when I knew I could help. That would have cost me something I can't afford to lose. Ariana stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. In her world, the world of calculated risks and leverage and strategic advantage, what he was saying made no sense. Why would anyone risk their livelihood, their freedom, their future, for a stranger. But then again, she'd asked to die fast, and he'd promised to make it slow. "Your jacket," she said finally, holding it out with trembling hands. "It smells like hospital and old coffee." But I didn't want them to take it. It was the only real thing. When everything else was pain and confusion and fear, this was real. Caleb took it gently. "I'm glad it helped." "What's your name? Your real name?" "Caleb Shaw." "Military?" He shouldn't have been surprised that she'd guessed. People like Ariana Locke didn't get where they were by missing details. "Once upon a time." "Combat medic?" "Yes, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am. I'm 32. You make me sound like somebody's grandmother." She tried to smile, failed, started crying instead. Soft, exhausted tears that had nothing to do with the pain and everything to do with delayed shock, with the weight of mortality finally crashing down now that she was safe enough to feel it. Caleb did something then that probably violated hospital protocol and definitely violated the professional distance he was supposed to maintain. He pulled up a chair, sat down beside her bed, and waited. Just waited. Present. Solid. Real. "I asked you to let me die," Ariana whispered through the tears. "I begged you." "I know. I built companies. I've stared down hostile takeovers and board rebellions and market crashes. I've given speeches to thousands. I've never quit anything in my life." She looked at him. "But in that moment, I wanted to quit. I wanted it to be over. What does that make me?" "Human," Caleb said simply. "You were in pain. You were scared. You'd just survived something that should have killed you. Asking for mercy doesn't make you weak. It makes you honest." "But you didn't give me mercy." "No. I gave you something better. I gave you mourning." Ariana's breath caught. "What?" "Tomorrow morning," Caleb said softly. "That's what I promised you, even if you didn't hear it. That you'd wake up to sunlight, that you'd get another day, another chance, another moment to decide what your life means." He stood, jacket over his arm. "Now you have it. What you do with it, that's up to you." He was halfway to the door when her voice stopped him one more time. "Caleb." He turned. Ariana was sitting up now despite the pain, despite the doctor's orders, despite everything. Her gray eyes, storm cloud eyes, were clear and focused and absolutely certain. "Thank you," she said, "for not letting me quit, for being stubborn, for caring when you had no reason to care." Caleb nodded once. "Sunrise is in 20 minutes. You should watch it. Doctor's orders." And then he was gone, leaving Ariana alone with the steady beep of monitors, the distant sounds of a hospital waking up, and a window that was just starting to glow with the promise of dawn. She watched the sun rise. And for the first time in years, Ariana Locke cried. Not from pain, not from fear, but from gratitude for a gift she'd almost refused, another day of life. The sunrise Caleb had promised came and went, painting Ariana's recovery room in shades of gold and rose before fading into the harsh fluorescent reality of a Thursday morning. She watched every second of it, unable to look away, unable to shake the feeling that she'd been given something infinitely precious, and had come within minutes of throwing it away. By 8 a.m., her phone was ringing off the hook. Her assistant Marcus had arrived at 7:30, pale and shaking, carrying her laptop and a stack of messages that had accumulated overnight. News of the accident had broken somewhere around 3 a.m. A low-level hospital employee had posted about it on social media, and by dawn the story was everywhere. Tech CEO nearly dies in crash. Ariana Locke fights for life. The woman who built an empire faces her mortality. "The board wants a statement," Marcus said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "The PR team is drafting 3 versions depending on your condition. Your mother has called 17 times, and there are about 40 reporters camped outside the hospital demanding updates." Ariana stared at him from her hospital bed, still foggy from pain medication, still feeling the ghost of Caleb's jacket under her head. "Tell them I'm fine. Tell them I'll be back to work by Monday." "Monday? Ariana, you nearly died." "Which is exactly why I need to project strength. The vultures are circling, Marcus. If they smell weakness, if they think for 1 second that I'm compromised, The hostile takeover attempts will start before I'm even out of this bed. She tried to sit up straighter, winced, kept going anyway. I need to control the narrative. Marcus hesitated, tablet clutched to his chest like a shield. There's another complication. What now? People are asking questions about who saved you. The paramedics are talking. The ER nurses are talking. Apparently it wasn't a doctor who stabilized you. It was a security guard, ex-military. Did battlefield medicine right there in the ER? He pulled up something on his tablet. It's already starting to trend. People love this stuff. The hero hiding in plain sight. The humble guard who turned out to be a warrior. It's very human interest. Ariana's chest tightened. Not from the injuries, from something else entirely. What's his name being reported as? It's not. Hospital administration is being tight-lipped about personnel, but it's only a matter of time before someone leaks it. Marcus looked up. This could be good for us, actually, if we play it right. The CEO saved by an everyday hero. It softens your image, makes you more relatable. No. The word came out harder than she'd intended. Marcus flinched. No, Ariana repeated, softer but no less firm. We're not using this. We're not turning someone's act of human decency into a PR opportunity. But Ariana, I said no. Issue a statement thanking the hospital staff generally. Keep it vague. And make sure security knows that if anyone leaks that man's name or information, they'll be dealing with our legal team. She met Marcus's confused gaze. He didn't do it for recognition. I'm not going to force it on him. Marcus nodded slowly, making notes. Okay, we can work with that. Generic gratitude. Focus on your recovery. Back to business as usual. He started toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're okay. You scared the hell out of all of us. After he left, Ariana lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling. She should feel relieved. She dodged death and was already planning her return to power. Within a week, this would be nothing but an interesting footnote in her biography. The time Ariana Locke stared down mortality and won. So why did she feel hollow? Why did the memory of a security guard's steady hands and calmer voice feel more real than anything else in her meticulously constructed life? She picked up her phone, scrolled through the messages from board members and investors and competitors sending hollow get-well-soons that barely masked their calculations about what her absence might mean for their own agendas. 300 messages. Not one of them asking how she felt, only asking when she'd be back, whether she was compromised, if the company was stable. Not one person had sat beside her bed and waited while she cried. Not one person had promised her sunrise. The door opened again. Dr. Webb this time, looking tired but satisfied. How's the pain? Manageable. That's what everyone says right before they try to do too much too fast. He checked her vitals, made notes in her chart. You got incredibly lucky, Ms. Locke. Another few minutes, and... He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Need. I know, Ariana said quietly. Your security guard made that very clear. Webb's expression shifted, something between respect and bewilderment. Caleb, yeah, I've been trying to figure out how to write up what happened last night. Technically, he practiced medicine without a license. I should report it, but if I do, he'll probably lose his job, and he shook his head. The man saved your life with textbook battlefield trauma care, better than some residents I've worked with. It would be criminal to punish him for that. Then don't report it. It's not that simple. Hospital administration is asking questions. There are liability issues, insurance concerns. I'll handle it. Ariana's voice took on the edge that had made her famous in boardrooms. I'll make it clear that any action taken against him will result in me pulling my foundation's funding from this hospital, all 20 million of it. Are we understood? Webb blinked, then smiled slightly. Understood. Though I have to say, that's a lot of leverage to spend on someone you barely know. He spent a lot more on someone he didn't know at all, Ariana said. Seems like the least I can do. After Webb left, Ariana found herself thinking about Caleb Shaw. Who was he, really? What kind of man walked away from heroism like it was nothing? What kind of person risked everything for a stranger and then disappeared into the shadows like he'd done nothing worth remembering? She wanted to know, needed to know, but more than that, she needed to thank him properly, Not with a generic hospital statement or a check or any of the transactional gestures that defined her normal world. Something real, something that mattered. But Caleb had made it clear he didn't want recognition, didn't want thanks, just wanted her to live well. What the hell did that even mean? 3 days passed. Ariana was moved to a private room, then cleared for discharge with strict orders to rest for at least 2 weeks. The news cycle moved on to other disasters, other stories. Her accident became old news, relegated to the back pages and forgotten think pieces about mortality and vulnerability and the fragility of success. She went home to her penthouse overlooking the city, 3,000 square feet of minimalist design and expensive silence. Her mother visited once, spent 20 minutes fussing before getting called away to a charity luncheon. The board sent flowers. Marcus handled everything remotely. Within a week, it was like the accident had never happened. Except Ariana couldn't stop thinking about those moments in the ER. Couldn't stop hearing Caleb's voice. I'm going to make it slow. I'm going to fight for every second. Why? She kept coming back to that question. Why had he cared so much? What did he get out of it? Nothing. The answer was nothing. He'd gotten nothing except the satisfaction of knowing she'd see another sunrise. It was the most selfless thing anyone had ever done for her, and she'd repaid him by telling Marcus to keep his name out of the press, to protect his privacy, to let him disappear back into whatever quiet life he'd built for himself. But was that what he wanted? Or was it what she wanted? To not owe anyone anything, to not be vulnerable, to not have to acknowledge that her life had been saved by someone she would have walked past without a second glance. On day 8 of her recovery, Ariana made a decision that would change everything. She got dressed, carefully, because her torso was still a map of bruises and healing incisions, and drove herself back to Mercy Heights Hospital. It was a Saturday afternoon. The hospital had that weekend lull, fewer visitors, quieter halls. Ariana walked through the main entrance wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, trying to be invisible, and made her way to the administrative offices. I need to speak to someone about a staff member, she told the receptionist. Caleb Shaw. Security. The receptionist's eyes widened with recognition of Ariana, not Caleb. Ms. Locke, should you be out of bed? I'm fine. Caleb Shaw. Can you tell me where to find him? 20 minutes and 3 redirects later, Ariana found herself standing outside the security office in the basement level of the hospital. It was a cramped space with flickering fluorescent lights and walls lined with monitors showing various corridors and parking lots. 2 guards were on duty, neither of them Caleb. Shaw? One of them said when she asked. He's on rounds, probably up in the East Wing. Want me to radio him? No, Ariana said quickly. I'll find him, thank you. She walked the halls for 30 minutes before she found him. He was on the 3rd floor, standing outside the pediatric ward, talking to a little girl in a wheelchair. The girl couldn't have been more than 6, bald from chemotherapy, her hospital gown printed with cartoon unicorns. She was crying, not loudly, but with the exhausted, hopeless kind of tears that children cry when they've been brave for too long. Caleb was crouched down to her eye level, speaking softly. Ariana couldn't hear the words, but she saw the girl's tears slow, saw her nod, saw Caleb pull something from his pocket, a small plastic toy, a tiny knight in armor, and press it into her palm. For courage, he said, loud enough now for Ariana to hear. Every knight needs courage for their quest, and you're the bravest knight I know. The little girl clutched the toy and managed a watery smile. You really think I'm brave? I know you are. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you keep going even when you are scared. And you, Sophie? You're the definition of brave. A nurse appeared, gently guiding Sophie back toward her room. The girl waved at Caleb, who waved back with a smile that didn't quite hide the sadness in his eyes. He stood, rolled his shoulders like he was carrying weight that never quite lifted, and turned, and saw Ariana. For a moment, neither of them moved. The hallway seemed to shrink down to just the 2 of them, this impossible space where the CEO and the security guard existed on equal ground. Ms. Locke, Caleb said finally, his expression carefully neutral. You shouldn't be here. You should be home resting. I could say the same about you. Don't you ever take a day off? I take Saturdays, usually. He gestured down the hall. But Marty called in sick, so I'm covering. Did you need something? Yes. No. Everything. Nothing. Ariana didn't know how to answer that question. She'd built companies with 10-year strategic plans, but standing here in front of this man who'd seen her at her most vulnerable, she had no plan at all. I wanted to thank you, she said, properly, not with a statement or a check, in person. Caleb's jaw tightened slightly. You already thanked me, in the recovery room. That was enough. It wasn't. It isn't. Ariana took a step closer, lowering her voice. You saved my life. That deserves more than a 2-minute conversation while I was half-conscious on pain meds. It deserves you going home and healing, not tracking me down when you should be resting. His voice was gentle but firm. You don't owe me anything, Ms. Locke. I did what anyone with my training would have done. Anyone with your training is a doctor making 6 figures. You're a security guard making... She trailed off, realizing she had no idea what hospital security paid. Not enough. Definitely not enough for someone with his skills. Enough to support my daughter, Caleb said quietly. Enough to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. Enough to be there for her when she needs me. That's all that matters. Ariana felt something shift in her chest. Not pain from the healing injuries, but something deeper. Here was a man who'd clearly sacrificed everything for his child, who'd taken a job so far below his capabilities, it was almost insulting just to be present, just to be a father. When was the last time Ariana had sacrificed anything for anyone? Your daughter, she said. How old? 8. Maddie. His expression softened when he said the name. She's everything. Then let me thank you by doing something for her. A college fund or... No. The word was sharp. Caleb's eyes hardened. I appreciate the gesture, but no. I don't want your money. I don't want your charity. I don't want anything except for you to live the life I fought to save. That's the only payment that matters. Then what do you want me to do? Ariana heard the frustration in her own voice and hated it. Just go back to my penthouse and my company and pretend none of this happened? Pretend that I didn't almost die? Pretend that you didn't... Yes. Caleb's voice was softer now, but no less firm. That's exactly what I want. Because that's normal. That's what people do. They move on. They live their lives. They don't get stuck in this moment of crisis and gratitude. You have a company to run, Ms. Locke. People who depend on you. Investors, employees, stakeholders. Go run it. Go be brilliant. Go change the world. That's how you thank me, by not wasting the second chance you were given. Ariana stared at him. She wanted to argue, wanted to explain that it wasn't that simple, that she couldn't just go back to who she was before because she wasn't sure who that person was anymore. That woman, the one who'd built empires and crushed competitors and measured worth in stock prices, had died on that gurney. Or maybe just had the luxury of her illusions stripped away. But looking at Caleb, she realized he didn't want to hear it. He didn't want her transformation or her revelations or her gratitude. He just wanted to go back to being invisible, back to being the quiet security guard who gave plastic nights to dying children and walked away from heroism like it was nothing special. Fine, she said finally. I'll go. But I want you to know something first. Caleb waited. You told me to live better in the recovery room. You said, then just live better, ma'am. I've been thinking about that, about what it means. And I realized I don't actually know how. She laughed bitterly. I've spent 15 years building a company and a reputation and a net worth, but I have no idea how to just live. Isn't that pathetic? Caleb's expression softened slightly. It's not pathetic. It's honest. Most people never even ask the question. So how do I learn? How do I live better? He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching hers. Then he said something that would haunt Ariana for weeks. Stop measuring worth by what you can take. Start measuring it by what you can give. Before she could respond, his radio crackled. Shaw, we need you in the ER, possible code blue. Caleb's entire demeanor shifted in an instant, from thoughtful to focused, from philosophical to practical. Copy. On my way. He looked at Ariana one more time. Go home, Ms. Locke. Heal. Live. That's all I ask. And then he was gone, jogging toward the stairs, leaving Ariana alone in the hallway outside the pediatric ward with questions she didn't know how to answer and advice she didn't know how to follow. She left the hospital. But she didn't go home. Instead, she found herself driving to the Lockwire headquarters, the glass and steel tower that had been her second home for a decade. It was Saturday, so the building was mostly empty except for the weekend skeleton crew. She rode the elevator to the top floor, walked into her office, and stood at the window overlooking the city. From up here, everything looked small, manageable. Like pieces on a chessboard she could move at will, but down there, in the streets and hospitals and homes, that's where real life happened. That's where people like Caleb worked triple shifts to support their daughters, where little girls fought cancer with plastic knights for courage, where value was measured not in stock prices but in sunrises and second chances. Ariana picked up her phone and called Marcus. "I need you to pull together information on the Heart Foundation's current charitable giving," she said without preamble. "I want to know what we're funding, why we're funding it, and whether any of it actually matters to real people." Okay. Can I ask what brought this on?" "Someone told me to live better. I'm trying to figure out how." She paused. "Also, I want you to research someone for me, discreetly. Caleb Shaw, former military, combat medic. Currently works security at Mercy Heights. I want to know everything, service record, commendations, why he left the Army, what his situation is now." "Ariana, I thought you said we weren't going to... We're not publicizing anything. This is just for me. I need to understand..." She trailed off. Understand what? Why he'd helped her. Why he'd walked away. Why she couldn't stop thinking about a man who wanted nothing to do with her. "I need to understand who he is," she finished quietly. "Can you do that?" "I'll have something for you by Monday." Marcus was good as his word. Monday morning, a folder appeared on Ariana's desk. Physical, not digital, because some things felt too important to reduce to pixels on a screen. She opened it with hands that trembled slightly. The first document was a military service record. Staff Sergeant Caleb Shaw, U.S. Army, 2009 to 2021. 3 tours in Afghanistan. Combat medic attached to an infantry unit. Silver Cross for valor under fire. Awarded after he dragged 4 wounded soldiers out of a firefight while under heavy enemy fire. Performing emergency surgery behind a Humvee with mortars falling all around them. 23 confirmed saves. 23 human beings who were alive because Caleb Shaw had refused to let them die. There were commendation after commendation. Photos from award ceremonies. Caleb in dress uniform, face younger but no less serious, eyes carrying the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen too much. Letters from commanding officers praising his courage, his skill, his unwavering calm under the worst possible circumstances. He'd been recommended for officer training twice, turned it down both times. SSG Shaw prefers direct patient care to administrative duties, one evaluation noted. His calling is clearly on the front lines, not behind a desk. Then the discharge papers. Honorable. Effective March 2021. Reason? Family hardship. The next document explained why. Sarah Shaw, née Bennett, married to Caleb Shaw 2011, died March 2021 in a single-vehicle traffic accident. Survived by husband and daughter Madison, age 4. Ariana read those lines 3 times, trying to process the timeline. He'd left the Army, left a career where he was clearly exceptional, clearly valued, because his wife died, and he had a 4-year-old daughter who needed him more than the military did. He'd given up everything to be a father. The final document in the folder was a financial snapshot. Current employment, Mercy Heights Hospital, Security Department, $38,000 annually. Rental apartment in a middle-income neighborhood. No debt except a modest car payment. Savings. Minimal, likely redirected to childcare and essentials. Ariana sat back in her chair, feeling physically sick. This man, this incredibly skilled, highly decorated, genuinely heroic man, was making $38,000 a year walking hospital hallways and breaking up parking lot disputes. He should be running trauma centers, teaching at medical schools, commanding teams of emergency responders. Instead, he was giving plastic knights to cancer patients and saving CEOs in his spare time. Because his daughter needed him home for dinner. The injustice of it hit Ariana like a physical blow. Here was someone who'd given everything, his career, his potential, probably his own dreams, for his child. While Ariana, what had she given? What had she sacrificed? She'd built a fortune, sure, built a company, but who had she helped along the way? Who was better off because Ariana Locke existed? Stop measuring worth by what you can take. Start measuring it by what you can give. She understood now what he'd meant. She'd spent her entire adult life taking opportunities, market share, competitive advantages, extracting value, creating wealth, accumulating power. But she'd given nothing that mattered. Ariana closed the folder, made a decision, and picked up her phone. This time she didn't call Marcus. She called the hospital directly, asked for the administrator, pulled every string, leveraged every connection until she had an appointment scheduled for Tuesday morning. There were things money and influence couldn't buy, but there were also things they could fix, and by God, she was going to fix this. That evening, around 7 p.m., Caleb's shift was ending when Patricia found him in the locker room. "You've got a visitor," she said, her expression unreadable. "Says it's important, wouldn't take no for an answer." Caleb frowned. Visitors were rare. "Who?" "See for yourself." He followed Patricia to the small conference room near the security office, expecting maybe a family member of someone he'd helped, or possibly HR with questions about the Ariana Locke incident that had finally worked its way through the bureaucratic system. He was not expecting Ariana herself. She stood when he entered, and for a second, Caleb just stared. She looked different than she had in the ER, put together, powerful, every inch the billionaire CEO, hair perfect, suit expensive, the kind of woman who commanded rooms and changed industries with a signature, but her eyes were the same, storm cloud gray, and right now they were looking at him with an intensity that made him want to back out of the room. "Ms. Locke," he said carefully, "I thought we agreed. I need to talk to you, please, just 5 minutes." Caleb glanced at Patricia, who shrugged and left, closing the door behind her. Suddenly, the conference room felt very small. "I looked into your background," Ariana said without preamble. "I know I shouldn't have. I know it's an invasion of privacy, but I needed to understand who you were. Why you—" She gestured vaguely. "Why you did what you did." Caleb's jaw tightened. "And did you find what you were looking for?" "I found out that you're wasting your potential, that you should be saving lives full-time, not checking badges and walking parking lots. That the only reason you're here is because—" She stopped, softened. "Because you lost your wife, because your daughter needed you, because you chose being a father over being a hero." "Those aren't mutually exclusive," Caleb said quietly. "Being a good father is the most heroic thing I'll ever do." "I know. I understand that now, but the thing is—" Ariana took a breath. "You shouldn't have to choose. You shouldn't have to sacrifice your career, your calling, just to be present for your child. That's not right. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Miss Locke. I think we both learned that the hard way. Maybe not, but it can be better." She moved closer, her voice earnest. "I want to help, not with money. I know you'll refuse that, but with opportunity, with options. I've been thinking about this nonstop for days, and I have an idea." Caleb crossed his arms. "I'm listening." "The Heart Foundation, that's my family's charitable organization. We fund hospitals, clinics, research initiatives, but we don't have anyone on staff who understands emergency medicine from a practical standpoint. We fund programs, but we don't know if they actually work on the ground level." She met his eyes. "I want to create a position, Director of Medical Emergency Preparedness. Someone who can evaluate our grants, work with hospitals to improve trauma response, develop training programs. Someone who knows what it's like in the trenches." Caleb was already shaking his head before she finished. "Ms. Locke, wait, let me finish. The position would be flexible, consulting basis. You set your own hours, work from home when you need to. Be there for Maddie's school events, her bedtimes, her soccer games, but also use your skills to save lives, just in a different way. By making sure hospitals everywhere have the resources and training they need when someone like you isn't around." She paused. "It would pay $85,000 a year to start, more if you take on additional responsibilities." The room went very quiet. Caleb stared at her, trying to process what she was offering, a job that matched his skills, flexibility for his daughter, more than double his current salary, everything he needed wrapped up in one impossible gift. "Why?" he finally asked. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you told me to live better, to stop taking and start giving. And this is giving, not charity, not a handout. This is recognizing that someone with your abilities shouldn't be trapped in a job that doesn't use them, just because life dealt you a bad hand." Her voice cracked slightly. "You saved my life, Caleb. Let me help save yours." Caleb wanted to say no. Every instinct screamed at him to refuse, to walk away, to not accept anything from this woman who made him feel things he hadn't felt since Sarah died. Gratitude and connection and the dangerous possibility of hope. But then he thought about Maddie, about the school field trips he'd missed because he couldn't afford the time off, about the tutoring she needed but he couldn't pay for, about the college fund that didn't exist because $38,000 a year left nothing to save after rent and food and the everyday math of single parenthood. "I'd need weekends," he said slowly, "and I'd need to be able to leave if Maddie got sick or had an emergency." Done. "And I won't be anyone's pet project. I won't be the sob story you parade around at charity galas to make yourself look compassionate." Ariana flinched but nodded. "I wouldn't dream of it. And if I say yes, this stays professional. You're not trying to assuage guilt or manufacture some kind of connection between us. This is a job, an opportunity. Nothing more. Nothing more." Ariana agreed, though something in her eyes suggested she wasn't entirely sure that was true. Caleb extended his hand. "Then I accept. Thank you, Ms. Locke." She took his hand. Her grip was firm, businessman-like, but her palm was warm and her fingers trembled slightly. "Ariana," she said, "if we're going to work together, call me Ariana." They shook on it, and the deal was done. Neither of them knew then that this decision, this moment of professional courtesy and mutual respect, would change everything. That working together would mean seeing each other not as archetypes, the hero and the CEO, but as humans, complicated, broken, beautiful humans trying to build something worth having from the rubble of their past lives. But that would come later. For now, they had an agreement, professional, clean, nothing more. Caleb went home that night and told Maddie they were going to be okay. That Daddy had a new job that would let him spend more time with her, help more people, build a future that felt less like survival and more like living. Maddie hugged him so tight he thought his ribs might crack. "Are you happy, Daddy?" she whispered. Caleb thought about sunrises and second chances, about a woman who'd looked at his life and decided it deserved better, about the possibility of using his skills to help people without sacrificing his daughter in the process. "Yes, sweetheart," he said, his voice thick. "I think maybe I am." And 3 miles away, in a penthouse overlooking the city, Ariana stood at her window and allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in years. The quiet satisfaction of knowing she'd done something good. Not strategic, not profitable, just good. She'd helped one person, one life made easier. One man given back his dignity and potential. It was a start. A small one. But it was something. And for the first time since the accident, Ariana felt like maybe, just maybe, she was learning what it meant to live better after all. The transition from security guard to foundation advisor happened faster than Caleb expected. Within 2 weeks, he had an office, small but functional, at the Heart Foundation headquarters, a laptop that didn't take 5 minutes to boot up, and business cards that felt strange in his hands. Director of Medical Emergency Preparedness. The title looked official, important, like it belonged to someone other than a widowed dad who still ate cereal for dinner when Maddie stayed at her grandmother's. But the strangest part wasn't the office or the salary or even the flexible hours that let him drop Maddie at school every morning and pick her up every afternoon. The strangest part was working with Ariana. She'd promised it would stay professional, clean, nothing more than a business relationship between employer and employee. And for the first month, that's exactly what it was. They communicated mostly through emails and the occasional phone call. Caleb reviewed grant applications, visited hospitals to assess their emergency response capabilities, wrote detailed reports about what worked and what didn't. Ariana read every word, implemented every suggestion, and kept her distance. It was efficient, respectful, exactly what they'd agreed to. It was also slowly driving both of them insane. The crack appeared during a routine site visit to a community clinic in a low-income neighborhood. The Heart Foundation had funded the clinic's expansion, and Caleb was there to evaluate whether the emergency medical supplies were being used effectively. Ariana had decided to join him, her first field visit, she'd said, wanting to see the impact firsthand rather than just reading about it in reports. They arrived separately, maintained professional distance, toured the facility with the clinic director explaining resource allocation and patient demographics. Everything was going according to plan until they walked into the pediatric wing and found a crisis in progress. A little boy, maybe 5 years old, was having a severe allergic reaction. His mother was screaming in Spanish, the on-duty nurse was fumbling with an EpiPen, and the child's lips were turning blue. Caleb moved before conscious thought engaged. 3 steps, and he was at the boy's side, taking the EpiPen from the nurse's shaking hands, administering the injection with practiced precision. "Call 911, he said calmly. "Anaphylaxis, patient is 5 years old, epinephrine administered at..." He checked his watch. 14:47. "Get an ambulance here now." The nurse scrambled for the phone. Caleb monitored the boy's breathing, kept the mother calm with a steady stream of reassurance in broken Spanish that was probably grammatically terrible but emotionally effective. Within 2 minutes, the boy's breathing eased. The blue tinge faded. He started crying, which was actually a good sign, meant his airway was clear. The ambulance arrived 10 minutes later and took the boy to the hospital for observation. The crisis was over. Just another Tuesday afternoon emergency that could have gone tragically wrong but didn't, because someone with training was in the right place at the right time. Caleb was washing his hands in the clinic bathroom when Ariana found him. "You okay?" she asked from the doorway. "Fine. Kid'll be fine too." Standard anaphylactic response, probably a peanut allergy based on what the mom was saying. He dried his hands, turned to face her. "We should add EpiPen training to the grant requirements." That nurse was terrified. She knew what to do, but panic took over. With better training, she could have handled it alone. Ariana nodded, making notes on her phone, but her hands were shaking. "Hey," Caleb's voice softened. "You okay?" I watched you save that child's life, just like you saved mine. Like it was nothing, like it was just..." She looked up at him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "How do you do that? How do you stay so calm when everything is falling apart?" "Training, experience, and honestly," he shrugged, "panic doesn't help. Someone has to be the steady one, or everyone drowns." "Who's steady for you?" The question came out quietly, almost too quiet to hear. "When you're drowning, who keeps you afloat?" Caleb opened his mouth to give some deflecting answer. He was fine. He didn't need anyone. He'd learned to swim alone. But something about the way she was looking at him made the easy lies impossible. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just tread water. Hope the current doesn't take me under before Maddie's old enough to understand." Ariana's expression cracked. Not much, just a hairline fracture in the professional composure she wore like armor. "That's not living better, that's surviving. Sometimes surviving is enough. It shouldn't have to be." They stood there in the clinic bathroom, surrounded by the smell of antiseptic and cheap soap, and something shifted between them. The careful distance they'd maintained started to erode. Not dramatically, there was no sudden moment of realization or romantic revelation. Just a quiet acknowledgement that maybe they understood each other in ways that had nothing to do with professional courtesy and everything to do with shared loneliness. The moment passed. They returned to professional mode, finished the clinic visit, drove to their respective homes. But something had changed. A door had opened just a crack, and neither of them was quite sure how to close it again. After that day, the boundaries got blurrier. It started small. Ariana began joining Caleb on more site visits, ostensibly to better understand the Foundation's work, but really because she found herself looking forward to those hours spent in hospitals, in clinics where she wasn't the CEO, wasn't the billionaire, wasn't anything except someone trying to help. Caleb started having lunch with her after meetings, initially to discuss grant applications, but increasingly to talk about other things. Maddie's struggles with math homework, Ariana's complicated relationship with her mother, the way they both felt like they were playing roles that didn't quite fit anymore. 3 months into Caleb's new position, they found themselves at the Heart Foundation's annual charity gala. Caleb hadn't wanted to attend. Black tie events where rich people congratulated themselves for writing checks weren't his scene, but Ariana had asked him to come as a representative of the foundation's new direction. Show the donors what their money is actually doing, she'd said. Tell them about the lives being saved. So Caleb rented a tux that made Maddie giggle and tell him he looked like a penguin and showed up to a ballroom full of people who probably spent more on their watches than he used to make in a year. Ariana found him within 5 minutes. She was wearing a silver dress that looked like starlight, her hair swept up, diamond earrings catching the chandelier light. She looked like she belonged here, in this world of wealth and influence and careful social performance. But when she saw Caleb standing awkwardly by the bar, her face lit up with genuine relief. "Thank God you're here," she said, taking his arm like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I've been making small talk for 40 minutes and I'm ready to fake a medical emergency just to escape." "Don't even joke about that." But Caleb was smiling. "You really hate these things, don't you? With the fire of 1,000 suns. All these people pretending to care about charity while really just networking and trying to get their names on plaques." She sighed. "Come on, let me introduce you to some board members before I lose my mind." What followed was the strangest 2 hours of Caleb's life. Ariana dragged him through the crowd, introducing him not as an employee but as a colleague, a partner, someone whose opinion mattered. She made him tell the story of the clinic, the little boy with the allergy, the importance of practical training over expensive equipment, and people listened, really listened. Not because they cared particularly about pediatric emergencies, but because Ariana Locke was making it clear that this man mattered to her, which meant he mattered to them. Halfway through the evening, during a lull in the presentations, Ariana and Caleb found themselves on the balcony overlooking the city. The October air was cool, carrying the smell of rain. Inside, an orchestra played something classical and elegant. "Thank you for coming," Ariana said quietly. "I know this isn't your world." "It's not yours either," Caleb observed. "Not really. You're better at playing the part, but you hate it just as much as I do." She laughed, a real laugh, not the polite social sound she used inside. "When did you get so good at reading people?" "You learn quick in combat. Knowing who's about to break under pressure can mean the difference between life and death." He leaned against the railing, looking out at the glittering city. "You're not about to break, but you're tired of holding it together alone." Ariana was quiet for a long moment. Then, "My therapist says I have trust issues, that I've built walls so high nobody can reach me, and I've convinced myself that's strength rather than fear." "Is she right?" "Probably. I've spent so long being the person everyone expects, the ruthless CEO, the brilliant entrepreneur, the woman who doesn't need anyone, that I forgot how to be anything else." She turned to look at him. "You make me forget. When we're working together, when we're just talking, I don't have to be Ariana Locke billionaire. I can just be me, whoever that is." Caleb's chest tightened. He knew he should say something professional, something to maintain the distance they'd agreed to. But looking at her, really seeing her, the vulnerability she was offering like a gift, he couldn't bring himself to push her away. "I know what you mean," he said instead. "When I'm with you, I don't have to be the guy who has all the answers, the one who's always steady, always strong, always okay. I can admit that I'm drowning too, that some days it's all I can do to keep my head above water." "Then maybe we can tread water together," Ariana said softly. "Just as friends. People who understand each other, nothing complicated." Friends. It was a safe word, a boundary they could hide behind. Caleb knew he should agree, should reinforce that wall before it crumbled completely. Instead, he heard himself say, "I'd like that." Inside, someone was calling for Ariana, another donor wanting her attention, another performance required. She squeezed Caleb's hand once, briefly, and then she was gone, swept back into the crowd and the role and the endless performance of being someone important. But Caleb stayed on the balcony for a long time, his hand still warm from her touch, wondering when exactly he'd started looking forward to seeing her more than was professionally appropriate. Wondering when this job had stopped being about flexible hours and financial stability and started being about the way Ariana's eyes lit up when she talked about the clinics they were helping, or the sound of her real laugh versus her social one, or the fact that she saw him, really saw him, in a way nobody had since Sarah died. It was dangerous territory, he knew that. Getting emotionally involved with his boss, with a woman who lived in a completely different world, with someone who could afford to be his friend now but would probably drift away once the novelty wore off, it was a recipe for heartbreak. But when Ariana looked back through the ballroom windows and smiled at him, really smiled, Caleb found himself smiling back. Dangerous territory indeed. The weeks that followed settled into a new rhythm. Professionally, they were a perfect team. Caleb's practical medical knowledge combined with Ariana's strategic thinking and resources created real, measurable impact. The foundation funded a dozen new emergency response training programs. 3 hospitals upgraded their trauma facilities based on Caleb's recommendations. Lives were being saved, systems were improving, and for the first time in her career, Ariana felt like her money was doing something that actually mattered. Personally, the lines kept blurring. Caleb started bringing Maddie to the foundation office sometimes when her after-school program was closed. The little girl would sit in the corner of his office doing homework while he worked, occasionally wandering out to ask questions or show him her drawings. Ariana found herself making excuses to stop by his office on those days, ostensibly to discuss projects, but really to see Maddie's latest artwork or hear about her school day. Maddie adored her, called her Miss Ariana, and showed her every craft project, every gold star, every small triumph with the unselfconscious pride of a child who hadn't yet learned that adults were too busy for such things. And Ariana, who had never particularly wanted children, who had built her life around career and ambition, found herself enchanted by this 8-year-old who looked at her like she was wonderful rather than wealthy. "You're good with her," Caleb observed one evening, watching Ariana help Maddie with a science project about the solar system. "She's easy to be good with. She's a great kid." Ariana carefully glued Jupiter onto the poster board. "You've done an amazing job raising her. She's kind, curious, empathetic, all the things that matter. Sarah deserves the credit for that. Those first 4 years, she was an incredible mother." Caleb's voice went soft. "I'm just trying not to screw up what she started." "You're doing more than that. You're showing her what it means to care about people, to use your skills to help, to sacrifice for what matters. That's not screwing up. That's being exactly the father she needs." Maddie looked up from her careful arrangement of planets. "Daddy's the best," she declared with absolute certainty. "He saves people. Like a superhero, but real." Ariana met Caleb's eyes over Maddie's head. "Yeah," she said quietly. "He really is." The moment stretched, loaded with things neither of them was ready to say. Then Maddie demanded help with Saturn's rings, and the moment passed, but the warmth lingered. It was Maddie, ultimately, who broke down the last walls between them. 3 weeks before Christmas, Caleb's mother called from Florida with news that his father had suffered a heart attack. Serious but stable. Caleb needed to fly down immediately, but that meant missing Maddie's winter concert and leaving her with his sister, who lived an hour away and had 3 kids of her own already struggling with holiday chaos. Ariana overheard Caleb on the phone, trying to coordinate logistics while clearly falling apart inside. She waited until he hung up, then knocked on his office door. "I'll take her," she said simply. Caleb looked up, eyes red-rimmed with stress and fear. "What?" "Maddie. I'll take her. However long you need, she can stay at my place. I have 3 guest rooms, all completely unused. She won't miss school, won't miss her concert, won't be displaced from her routine." Ariana held up a hand before he could protest. "I know what you're going to say, that it's too much, that you couldn't possibly, that I don't know what I'm doing. You're right. I don't know what I'm doing, but I care about her and I care about you, and I don't want either of you to go through this alone when I can help." "Ariana, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." She softened her voice. "Let me help, Caleb. Please. You're always the one saving everyone else. Let someone save you for once." Caleb stared at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, "She'll need dinner. And her homework checked. And she gets scared at night sometimes, so someone has to check under the bed for monsters even though she knows they're not real. I can do that. All of it. I'll figure it out." Ariana smiled. How hard can one 8-year-old be? As it turned out, significantly harder than running a billion-dollar company. The first night, Maddie refused to eat the gourmet meal Ariana's chef had prepared, declaring that it looked weird. They ended up ordering pizza and eating it on the living room floor while watching a Disney movie. Maddie spilled juice on a rug that cost more than most people's cars. Ariana found she didn't care at all. The second night, Maddie had nightmares. Ariana spent 2 hours sitting on the edge of the guest bed, holding the little girl's hand and promising that her grandfather would be okay, that her daddy would come home soon, that she was safe and loved, and everything would be all right. She sang lullabies she didn't know she remembered from her own childhood, and felt her heart crack open when Maddie finally fell asleep, still clutching her fingers. By the third night, they'd established a routine. Homework at the kitchen table, where Ariana discovered she'd completely forgotten how to do fourth-grade math. Dinner. Always something simple, because Maddie had inherited her father's practical tastes. Then a movie or a book, and the monster check that Ariana performed with exaggerated seriousness because she understood that 8-year-olds needed their fears taken seriously, even the imaginary ones. On the fourth night, Maddie looked up from her math homework and asked, "Miss Ariana, do you like my daddy?" Ariana's pen froze mid-signature on a document she'd been reviewing. "Of course I do. He's a good man and a wonderful colleague." "No," Maddie interrupted with the painful honesty of children. "I mean, do you like him, the way people do in movies?" There were a dozen deflections Ariana could have used, should have used, professional boundaries, appropriate responses, the careful dance of adult relationships that children didn't need to witness. But looking at Maddie's open, hopeful face, Ariana found she couldn't lie. "I think I might," she admitted quietly. "But it's complicated. Your dad and I are very different. We live in different worlds. And he loved your mom so much. I would never want to replace her or make either of you feel like Mommy would like you," Maddie said with absolute certainty. "She always said Daddy needed someone strong, someone who could keep up with him. And you saved him, kinda. Not like he saved you from the accident, but different. He smiles more now, laughs more. He's less sad." Ariana's throat tightened. "He makes me less lonely," she whispered. "I didn't even realize how lonely I was until I met him. Your dad sees me, really sees me, in a way nobody else ever has. Like I'm a person, not just a name or a bank account. So why don't you tell him?" "Because I'm scared. What if he doesn't feel the same way? What if I ruin our friendship? What if I mess everything up?" She smiled sadly. "I'm very good at business, Maddie, but I'm terrible at this." Maddie considered this with the seriousness of an old soul in a child's body. Then she reached across the table and took Ariana's hand. "Daddy says being brave isn't not being scared. It's being scared and doing the thing anyway." She squeezed Ariana's fingers. "Maybe you could be brave, like him." Before Ariana could respond, her phone rang. Caleb. Her heart jumped. "How is he?" she asked immediately. "Stable. Surgery went well. He'll be okay." Caleb's voice was thick with relief and exhaustion. "How's Maddie? Is she okay? Is she being good?" "She's perfect. More than perfect. Caleb, she's..." Ariana looked at the little girl across the table, still holding her hand, and felt something shift in her chest. "She's amazing. And I'm keeping her forever, so you might as well just stay in Florida." Maddie giggled. Caleb laughed, a real laugh, the first one Ariana had heard from him in days. "I'll be home tomorrow night," he said. "My flight lands at 8. I can pick her up around 9 if that works." "Take your time, stay with your father. We're fine here." Actually, Ariana made a decision. "Maddie's winter concert is tomorrow at 7. I was planning to take her. Why don't you meet us there? You shouldn't miss it." "Ariana, you don't have to." "I want to. And Maddie's worked so hard on her solo. She'd be devastated if you weren't there." She softened her voice. "Please, let me do this." There was a pause, then, "Okay, thank you for everything. I don't know how to..." "Ariana, you've given me so much. The job, the flexibility, and now this. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You already have," Ariana said, and meant it more than she'd meant anything in a long time. "I'll see you tomorrow." The winter concert was held in the school's cramped auditorium, filled with parents and siblings and the chaotic energy of elementary school performances. Ariana sat in the third row, completely overdressed in her work clothes, clutching a bouquet of flowers she'd bought at an emergency stop, because apparently that's what you brought to these things. She watched Maddie on stage, bright-eyed and confident in her angel costume, singing about peace and joy with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of childhood, and felt tears prick her eyes, not because the performance was particularly good, though it was charming, but because she was here. She, Ariana Locke, was sitting in a school auditorium watching a child's concert and feeling her heart swell with pride for a little girl who wasn't even hers. When had that happened? When had this stopped being a favor and started being something she actually wanted? Movement in her peripheral vision. She turned and saw Caleb slipping into the seat beside her, looking exhausted but happy. He'd come straight from the airport, still in travel clothes, but he'd made it. For his daughter. Because that's who he was. The man who always showed up, who never missed what mattered. "You made it," Ariana whispered. "Wouldn't miss it." He glanced at her. "Thank you. For being here. For her. There's nowhere else I'd rather be." It was true. Somehow, impossibly, sitting in this uncomfortable plastic chair watching an elementary school concert had become more important than any board meeting or business deal or social event she'd attended in years. On stage, Maddie spotted her father. Her whole face lit up, and her next verse came out a little louder, a little prouder, because her daddy was there watching. When the song ended and applause filled the auditorium, Maddie found Ariana in the crowd too, and her smile got even bigger. Caleb noticed. "She adores you, you know. Hasn't stopped talking about Miss Ariana all week. How you let her stay up late watching movies. How you checked for monsters. How you helped with her math homework even though..." He smiled. "She said you were really bad at fractions." "Terrible," Ariana agreed. "I can analyze market trends and predict stock fluctuations, but fourth grade math defeats me completely." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the rest of the concert. But Ariana was hyper-aware of Caleb beside her, his steady presence, the warmth radiating from him, the way their shoulders almost but not quite touched, the careful distance they maintained, the thing neither of them was saying. After the concert ended, Maddie ran to them through the crowd of parents. She hugged Caleb first, fierce and tight, then turned and hugged Ariana just as hard. "Did you see me? Did I do good?" "You were perfect," Caleb said, his voice thick with emotion. "You were brilliant," Ariana added. "Best angel in the whole show." Maddie beamed. Then, with the terrifying perception of children, she looked between them and asked, "Are you guys going to get married?" Caleb choked on air. Ariana's mind went completely blank. Other parents nearby turned to stare. "Maddie," Caleb managed. We're not... "But you like each other," Maddie insisted with impeccable 8-year-old logic. "And you're always together, and Miss Ariana took care of me like a mommy. So I thought maybe..." Ariana knelt down to Maddie's level, aware that they were causing a scene, aware that this was the most mortifying moment of her professional life, aware that she should shut this down immediately. Instead, she said gently, "Your dad and I are friends. Good friends. And I love spending time with both of you. But relationships are complicated, sweetheart. Adults have to figure out a lot of things before they can make those kinds of decisions." "But you do like him," Maddie pressed. "I can tell." Ariana looked up at Caleb. His eyes were wide, vulnerable, searching hers for... what? Permission? Confirmation? An escape route? "Yeah," Ariana said, still holding Caleb's gaze. "I do. Very much." The auditorium seemed to go quiet around them. Or maybe it was just that everything else faded away except Caleb's face, the way his expression shifted from shock to something else, something warm and hopeful and terrified all at once. "Maddie," he said quietly, "why don't you go find your friend Emma? I need to talk to Miss Ariana for a minute." Maddie, sensing victory, grinned and scampered off, leaving Caleb and Ariana alone in a sea of strangers, having just admitted out loud what they'd both been carefully not acknowledging for months. "I'm sorry," Ariana started. "That wasn't how I wanted to. I shouldn't have..." "Did you mean it?" She stopped, looked at him. "Every word." Caleb ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of pure stress. This is a terrible idea. I'm your employee. You're my boss. We're in completely different worlds. I have a daughter who's already getting attached to you, and if this goes wrong, I know. I've thought about all of that. Every possible way this could blow up in our faces. Ariana took a breath. But I've also thought about how you make me laugh. How you see me as a person instead of a portfolio. How being with you and Maddie feels more like home than my penthouse ever has. And I'm terrified, Caleb. Absolutely terrified. But maybe Maddie's right. Maybe being brave means doing the thing anyway. Caleb stared at her. Around them, families were filtering out, the auditorium emptying. They were running out of time, out of privacy, out of chances to say what needed saying. I haven't felt this way since Sarah, he said finally. Didn't think I ever would again. Didn't think I deserved to. And then you showed up in your designer clothes and your terrifying competence, and you nearly died on an ER floor, and I thought, he shook his head. I thought if I could just save you, it would make up for not being able to save her. But then you saved me right back. Gave me a job that lets me be the father I need to be. Took care of my daughter like she was precious. Made me remember what it felt like to want something for myself instead of just surviving. So what do we do? Ariana whispered. Caleb looked across the auditorium to where Maddie was showing Emma her flowers. His daughter. His entire world. The reason he made every decision, every sacrifice. We take it slow, he said. We figure out how to do this without hurting her if it doesn't work. We keep it private until we're sure. And we promise, no matter what happens between us, we don't let it affect the work. Too many people depend on what we're building to let personal feelings destroy it. I can agree to that. And if this goes wrong, Caleb continued, his voice rough, if we crash and burn and end up hating each other, I need to know that Maddie won't pay the price. That you won't just disappear from her life because things got awkward. Ariana understood what he was really asking. Could she love them both? Not just him, but the package deal. The ready-made family, the responsibility. She thought about the last week, the spilled juice and the homework struggles and the nightmare vigils, the way Maddie's hand felt in hers, the sound of her laugh, the trust in her eyes when she asked Ariana to check for monsters. I couldn't disappear from her life if I tried, Ariana said honestly. She's already claimed a piece of my heart. Both of you have. She smiled. So yes, slow, private, careful, and if it doesn't work romantically, we figure out how to still be family, because that's what we're becoming, whether we planned it or not. Caleb reached out and took her hand. Right there in the emptying auditorium, with the last few parents straggling out and the janitors starting to sweep up fallen programs. Okay, he said. Let's be brave. Maddie chose that moment to return, bouncing with 8-year-old energy. She saw their joined hands and pumped her fist in triumph. I knew it, Caleb laughed. Ariana couldn't stop smiling. And just like that, in the most mundane possible setting, an elementary school auditorium on a Tuesday night in December, 3 people who'd been incomplete began to carefully, hopefully, build something whole. Taking it slow turned out to be harder than either of them anticipated. Not because of overwhelming passion or inability to control themselves, but because slow felt dishonest when what they were building had already woven itself into the fabric of their daily lives. They were already having dinner together 3 nights a week. Already sharing the small victories and frustrations of their days, already functioning like a unit in ways that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with the quiet intimacy of actually knowing another person. Still, they tried. For Maddie's sake, they kept their hand-holding private. Their first real date happened 3 weeks after the concert, on a Saturday when Maddie was at a sleepover. Dinner at a quiet restaurant across town where neither of them was likely to be recognized. Ariana wore jeans, actually owned a pair, which surprised Caleb, and he wore a button-down that made her forget how to form coherent sentences for a solid 30 seconds. This is weird, Ariana said halfway through the appetizer. Good weird, but weird. Which part? The date? The fact that we're on a date? Or the fact that I've seen you negotiate $1,000,000 grants but you're nervous about ordering dessert? All of it, she laughed, relaxing slightly. I haven't been on a first date in 8 years. I don't remember how this works. Am I supposed to pretend I don't already know everything about you? That I haven't seen you handle trauma victims and help my daughter with her science homework? That I don't already know you take your coffee black and hate mushrooms and have a scar on your left shoulder from shrapnel? Caleb smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face into something younger, lighter. We could pretend? Start over. Hi, I'm Caleb. I like long walks on the beach and saving people's lives in my spare time. Hi, I'm Ariana. I'm emotionally unavailable and terrible at relationships, but I make a decent living. She grinned. See? We're naturals at this. The conversation flowed easily after that, moving from teasing to serious and back again. They talked about Sarah. Ariana had been afraid to bring her up, but Caleb spoke about his late wife with a fondness that held no bitterness, only the gentle grief of someone who'd loved deeply and learned to carry the loss without letting it crush him. They talked about Ariana's parents, her complicated relationship with wealth and expectation, the way she'd built her entire identity around being untouchable, and was only now learning that maybe being touched wasn't weakness. When did you decide? Caleb asked as they shared a slice of chocolate cake neither of them had room for. That you wanted this, us. Ariana thought about it, trying to pinpoint the exact moment. There wasn't one moment, it was 1,000 small ones. The way you smiled at Maddie's drawings, how you talked to that little boy at the clinic like he was a person, not a patient. The night you brought me soup when I was working late and you noticed I hadn't eaten. She met his eyes. But if I had to choose, it was when Maddie had that nightmare. When I was sitting on her bed at 3 a.m. holding her hand, and I realized I didn't want to give this back. This feeling of being needed by someone, of mattering in a way that has nothing to do with money or power. You've always mattered, Caleb said quietly, just not to the right people. They didn't kiss that night. Caleb walked Ariana to her car, held her hand for a long moment, and said he'd see her Monday. It felt both frustratingly chaste and exactly right, a promise of more, without rushing towards something neither of them was quite ready for. The second date was a week later, then a third. Then they stopped counting because at some point it just became their lives, woven together in ways that made separating the romantic from the familial, from the professional, impossible. Caleb would pick up groceries for Ariana when she was working late. She'd show up at his apartment with Maddie's favorite ice cream and watch animated movies she'd never heard of. They'd work side by side at the foundation, and sometimes their fingers would brush reaching for the same report, and the electricity of it would make them both pause and remember they were trying to be professional. Maddie knew, of course. 8-year-olds were perceptive in ways that made adults uncomfortable. She'd catch them looking at each other and grin knowingly, started referring to weekend plans as family time without anyone asking her to, drew pictures of the three of them together, stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. She's getting attached, Caleb said one evening after Maddie had gone to bed. They were in his living room, the small space made smaller by Ariana's presence taking up all the air. If this doesn't work out, it will, Ariana said with a certainty she didn't entirely feel but needed to project. I'm not going anywhere, Caleb. I know my track record doesn't inspire confidence, but I'm all in. Whatever this is, whatever it becomes, I'm committed. You say that now. But when things get hard, and they will get hard, when you remember that I come with a whole child and a limited income and a past that includes watching my wife die, stop. Ariana moved closer, taking his face in her hands, making him look at her. I know what I'm signing up for. I'm not some naive girl with romantic fantasies about love conquering all. I know relationships take work. I know there will be hard days and disagreements and moments when we want to strangle each other. But I also know that what we're building is worth fighting for. You're worth fighting for. Maddie's worth fighting for. Caleb's eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, for the inevitable moment when reality would set in and she'd realize what a mistake this was. But he didn't find it, just determination and hope and something that looked dangerously close to love. Okay, he said finally. Okay. That was the night he kissed her for the first time. Soft and careful, like she was something precious that might break. She kissed him back with a fierceness that surprised them both, years of loneliness and walls and careful distance crumbling in the space of a heartbeat. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. I'm terrified, he admitted. Me too. Good. At least we're terrified together. The real test came in February, 4 months into their careful dance around what they meant to each other. The Hart Foundation was hosting a major fundraising event, bigger than the gala Caleb had attended, with press coverage and speeches and the kind of public scrutiny that made privacy impossible. Ariana was expected to attend with someone, and for the first time she wanted that someone to be Caleb. Absolutely not, Caleb said when she brought it up. We agreed to keep this private. The moment we show up together at a public event, everyone will know. The media will have a field day. Billionaire CEO dating her employee. They'll make it sound tawdry and opportunistic, like I'm using you for money, or you're slumming it with the help. I don't care what they say. I do. And more importantly, Maddie will care when kids at school start talking, when their parents gossip, when suddenly her life isn't private anymore because her dad is dating someone famous. He ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. I can't do that to her. Won't do that to her. Ariana knew he was right. He knew that going public would open them up to scrutiny and judgment and all the ugliness that came with being in the spotlight. But she was also tired of hiding, tired of pretending that the most important relationship in her life had to be kept secret because other people wouldn't understand. Then what do we do? She asked. Hide forever? Sneak around like we're doing something wrong? I don't know. But I know I'm not ready for the world to have opinions about my daughter's life. Not yet. They didn't fight exactly. Both were too conflict-averse, too aware of what was at stake, but the conversation left a tension between them that lasted for days. Ariana attended the fundraiser alone, smiling for cameras and making small talk while her mind was miles away. Caleb stayed home with Maddie, helped her build an elaborate blanket fort, and tried not to think about Ariana in her evening gown, surrounded by people who belonged in her world in ways he never would. At 11 p.m., long after the event should have ended, Ariana showed up at Caleb's apartment still in her gown. You're right, she said when he opened the door. About protecting Maddie, about being careful, about all of it. But you're also wrong about one thing. What's that? You think you don't belong in my world. But Caleb, you are my world. You and Maddie. Everything else, the company, the money, the public persona, that's just noise. This is real. She gestured between them. And I'm tired of treating real like it's something to be ashamed of. Caleb stared at her. What are you saying? I'm saying we find a middle ground. We don't hide, but we don't announce. We live our lives, and if people figure it out, they figure it out. But we don't let fear of judgment stop us from being together. She took his hand. I want to be able to have dinner with you in public. To bring you to work events as my partner, not just my colleague. To let Maddie see that loving someone doesn't mean hiding them. The media will crucify us. Probably, but I've weathered worse, and you're a decorated combat veteran who saves lives. If they try to paint you as a gold digger, they'll have to contend with the fact that you're more qualified than half the people I've dated and infinitely more honorable. She smiled. Besides, I have excellent lawyers and a PR team that specializes in making problems disappear. Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to list all the reasons this was still a terrible idea. But looking at Ariana standing in his cramped doorway in a designer gown worth more than his annual salary, refusing to let him push her away, he found he didn't have the energy to fight what he wanted. Okay, he said. Middle ground, carefully public. But the first moment I think it's hurting Maddie, we pull back, reassess, figure it out together. Ariana squeezed his hand. I promise. The shift happened gradually. They started having lunch together at the foundation. Not hidden away, but not advertising either. Went to Maddie's soccer games as a unit, sitting together in the bleachers. When colleagues asked about their relationship, they were honest without being effusive. They were together. It was new. They were figuring it out. The first article appeared in March. A gossip blog noticed them having dinner and ran with it. Ariana Locke's new mystery man. Who is he? The photo was grainy, taken from across the street, but unmistakably them. The comments section was a mix of curiosity and judgment. Caleb read the article 3 times, his jaw getting tighter with each pass. The speculation, the assumptions, the way they reduced their relationship to a transaction or a phase or a curiosity. Don't read the comments, Ariana advised, taking his phone away. Never read the comments. There's nothing in there but poison and people who've never met us pretending they know our lives. They're calling me a leech, a user, saying I'm after your money. They don't know you. If they did, they'd know that you've turned down every financial offer I've made except the job, which you earned on merit. They'd know you've never asked me for a single thing except to check for monsters under Maddie's bed. She cupped his face. I know who you are. Maddie knows. The people who matter know. Everyone else is just noise. But the noise got louder. More articles appeared. Someone found his military records and wrote a piece about the war hero who captured a billionaire's heart. It was meant to be flattering, but it felt invasive. His privacy, his service, his grief over Sarah, all of it packaged into clickbait for strangers to consume and judge. The worst part was Maddie. Kids at school started asking questions. Is your dad really dating that rich lady? Are you going to be rich now? My mom says your dad's just using her for money. Maddie came home confused and hurt, not understanding why people were saying mean things about her daddy. Caleb wanted to pull back, to retreat into privacy and safety and the comfortable anonymity he'd built his life around. But Ariana had a different idea. Let me make a statement, she said. Official, clear, something that makes it impossible for people to paint you as anything other than what you are. Ariana, that'll just make it worse. No. What makes it worse is silence, letting people fill in the gaps with their own narratives. She was already on her phone, already crafting something. Trust me, I've been dealing with public perception my entire career. I know how to control a narrative. 2 days later, Ariana Locke held a press conference. Not at the foundation, but at Mercy Heights Hospital, standing in the lobby where Caleb had first saved her life. The media showed up in force, expecting some corporate announcement or philanthropic initiative. Instead, they got Ariana standing at a podium, calm and professional, telling a story. 6 months ago, I was in a car accident, she began. Trauma doctors said I was minutes from death, but I'm standing here today because of one man, a night shift security guard with combat medic training who refused to let me die. She told the whole story. The ER, the emergency procedures, the jacket under her head, the sunrise he'd promised, the quiet dignity of walking away without expecting thanks or recognition. His name is Caleb Shaw, she continued. And yes, since you've all been speculating, we're in a relationship, but not for the reasons your articles suggest. I'm not his charity case, and he's not my project. We're two people who found each other in the worst possible moment and discovered that maybe we were meant to find each other. She paused, letting that sink in. Caleb Shaw is a decorated combat veteran, a Silver Cross recipient, a man who saved 23 lives under enemy fire, a single father raising an incredible daughter with more grace and love than anyone I've ever met. He works at the Heart Foundation now, using his expertise to save lives on a systemic level, improving emergency response, training medical staff, making sure that what he did for me that night, someone else can do for the next person who needs it. Her voice strengthened. I've been asked why I'm dating someone so different from me, why I'd choose a security guard over the CEOs and investors who usually occupy my social circle. And the answer is simple, because he's better than all of them. Because when given the choice between self-interest and helping a stranger, he chose help. Because he measures worth not in stock prices but in lives saved and children raised and kindness given freely. The press room was silent. Cameras flashed. So yes, Ariana concluded, we're together, and I'm grateful every day that he's in my life. If you want to write articles about that, fine. But get your facts straight. He's not using me. I'm not slumming it. We're just two people who've been given second chances, mine at life, his at love, and we're brave enough to take them. She stepped away from the podium without taking questions, leaving the media to process what they'd just heard. Across the city, Caleb watched the press conference from the foundation office, Maddie beside him on the couch. The little girl was bouncing with excitement. She's telling everyone how great you are, Daddy, like a superhero origin story. Caleb couldn't speak, couldn't process what Ariana had just done, standing up in front of cameras and the world and claiming him, not as an embarrassment or a secret or a phase, but as someone she was proud to be with, someone worth defending. His phone buzzed, a text from Ariana. Too much? Sorry. Couldn't help myself. You're worth shouting about. He texted back. You're insane, but thank you. But for seeing me, for saying it out loud. Always. See you at home? And there it was. Home. Not his apartment or her penthouse, but wherever the three of them were together, that was home. The response to Ariana's statement was mixed. Some people loved it. The romantic angle, the second chance story, the combat hero, and the CEO. Others remained skeptical, convinced it was a PR stunt or that the relationship would crash and burn once the novelty wore off. But the really nasty speculation stopped. It was hard to paint Caleb as a gold digger when Ariana Locke was on live television explaining exactly how many lives he'd saved and why he deserved respect. More importantly, the questions at Maddie's school stopped, or at least changed. Instead of, is your dad using that rich lady? It became, wow, your dad's a real hero? Kids wanted to hear war stories, wanted to know about saving lives, wanted to see Caleb as something other than a security guard who got lucky. I told Emma you saved 100 people, Maddie informed him one night at dinner. The three of them, Caleb, Maddie, and Ariana, were at his apartment, sharing pizza because Ariana had finally admitted that fancy food wasn't actually better than pepperoni on a Friday night. 23 confirmed, Caleb corrected. Don't exaggerate. 23 is still a lot. Maddie turned to Ariana. How many people have you saved? Ariana considered the question seriously. Directly? Just one. Your dad. He saved my life, but I think maybe I saved his too. Different kind of saving, but it counts. You saved mine too, Maddie said matter-of-factly. I was really sad after Mommy died. Daddy was sad too, even though he tried to hide it. But you made us less sad. That's like saving us from sadness. The adults exchanged looks over her head, both fighting back tears, out of the mouths of babes. Well then, Ariana said, her voice thick. I guess we've all saved each other. That makes us a pretty good team. The best team, Maddie agreed and went back to her pizza, oblivious to the emotional devastation she'd just inflicted on two fully grown adults who were desperately in love with her and each other and didn't quite know how to say it yet. That night, after Maddie was asleep in her room and Ariana was gathering her things to leave, Caleb stopped her at the door. Move in with us, he said. Ariana froze. What? Move in. Not into some new place that's a compromise between your world and mine. Here, this apartment, with me and Maddie. Be part of this. He gestured around the small space that held all his life. I know it's not what you're used to. I know you have a penthouse with 3,000 square feet and a view and probably a bathroom bigger than my entire bedroom. But this is my home. Our home. And I want you in it. Caleb, It's tiny. There's barely room for 2 people, let alone 3. My closet alone would take up half your space. So we get a bigger place. Together. Something that's ours, not yours or mine. He took her hands. I'm not trying to trap you in poverty or make some point about authentic living. I just want to wake up with you here. Want Maddie to have you at breakfast, not just on weekends. Want to build a life that's actually shared, not just coordinated. Ariana's eyes were bright with tears. I've never lived with anyone. Even my longest relationships, I kept my own space, my own escape route. I know. And if you need that, if you need your own place to retreat to when I'm being impossible or Maddie's being 8, I understand. But, Ariana, he stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. I'm not asking you to give up your independence. I'm asking you to share your life with mine, really share it. The boring mornings and the tough evenings and the middle of the night moments when everything feels impossible. What if I'm terrible at it? What if I don't know how to be domestic and present and all the things Maddie needs? Then we'll figure it out together, the same way we figured out everything else. He smiled. You learned to check for monsters. You survived a week of single parenting. You can learn this too. Ariana laughed through her tears. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, but it's worth it. You're worth it. This is worth it. She kissed him then, deep and sure and full of promise. When they pulled apart, she was smiling. Okay. Yes. Let's find a place. Together. Something with enough room for Maddie's craft supplies and my embarrassing shoe collection and your collection of medical textbooks you pretend you don't still read. I don't pretend anything. I definitely still read them. I know. I see you sneaking them into bed like they're novels. She grinned. It's incredibly nerdy, and I find it unreasonably attractive. They started looking for a place the next week. Nothing too flashy, Caleb had his limits, but something bigger than his apartment, in a good school district for Maddie, with enough space for all of them to breathe. Ariana tried not to steamroll the process with her money and opinions, letting Caleb have equal say, learning that compromise meant sometimes choosing the house with the better yard over the one with the gourmet kitchen because Maddie needed space to play more than Ariana needed marble countertops. They found it in April. A 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy but solid and warm and full of potential. A yard for Maddie, an office space where Ariana could work from home, a garage where Caleb could finally unpack the boxes he'd been living out of since Sarah died. It's perfect, Maddie declared the first time she saw it, running through the empty rooms with her arms spread wide. This one can be my room, and this one can be for guests, and this one, she peeked into the master bedroom, is big enough for both of you. She said it so casually, so matter-of-factly, like of course they'd share a room, of course they were a unit now. Caleb and Ariana looked at each other, both thinking the same thing. When had this become so normal? When had they gone from carefully dating to planning a shared life? Somewhere between the press conference and the pizza nights, and the moment Ariana had agreed to check for monsters, they'd crossed a line. They were a family now, messy and unconventional and still figuring out the details, but family nonetheless. They moved in June, just before Maddie's summer break. The actual moving process was chaotic. Ariana had accumulated way too many belongings for someone who claimed to be a minimalist, and Caleb's boxes revealed a startling number of tactical gear and medical supplies that he might need someday. Maddie directed everything like a tiny general, declaring where furniture should go and which rooms needed which colors. The first night in the new house, they ordered Chinese takeout and ate it sitting on the floor of the living room because their table hadn't arrived yet. Maddie fell asleep between them, exhausted from excitement and carrying boxes. Caleb and Ariana looked at each other over her head. "We did it," Ariana whispered. "We actually built this." "Terrifying, isn't it?" "Completely." She smiled. "And perfect. This is perfect." Caleb reached across their sleeping daughter to take Ariana's hand. "I love you," he said. Simple, honest. The words he'd been too afraid to say because they felt like tempting fate. Ariana's breath caught. "I love you too. Both of you. My whole heart." They sat there on the floor of their new home, holding hands across their daughter, his by blood, theirs by choice, and felt the weight of what they'd created. Not just a relationship or a household, but a family, built on second chances and sunrise promises and the stubborn refusal to let fear win. Outside, the neighborhood settled into evening quiet. Inside, 3 people who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances learned what it meant to be home. Summer settled over their new home like a warm blanket, bringing with it a rhythm that felt both strange and inevitable. Caleb woke early out of military habit, making coffee in a kitchen that still smelled like fresh paint. Ariana emerged an hour later, bleary-eyed and reaching for him before she was fully conscious, her expensive silk pajamas a ridiculous contrast to his worn army t-shirt. Maddie bounced down the stairs at 7:30 sharp, already talking about her plans for the day before either adult had finished their first cup of coffee. It was chaotic and imperfect, and nothing like the life any of them had imagined. It was also the happiest they'd ever been. The work at the Heart Foundation continued to grow. What had started as a single position for Caleb had evolved into an entire department dedicated to emergency medical preparedness. They hired 3 more people, all with backgrounds in emergency medicine, all committed to the mission of saving lives through better systems and training. Hospitals across the state were adopting their protocols. Emergency response times were improving. The data showed real, measurable impact. "We're doing something that matters," Ariana said one evening, reviewing quarterly reports at the kitchen table while Caleb made dinner and Maddie did homework. "Not just throwing money at problems, but actually solving them." "You sound surprised," Caleb observed, stirring pasta sauce. "I am. I spent 15 years building lock wire, and yeah, we made good products and turned a profit and all that. But this?" She gestured at the reports. This is real. People are alive because of what we're building. That's not abstract. That's not shareholder value or market disruption. That's actual human lives saved. Maddie looked up from her math problems. Is that why you and Daddy work so much? Because you're saving people? Trying to, Ariana said. It's different from how your dad used to save people. He did it one person at a time, right there in the moment. We're trying to do it bigger, making sure that when someone needs help, the people who show up have the right training and tools. So you're teaching other people to be like Daddy. Exactly like that. Maddie considered this with the seriousness of a 9-year-old processing big concepts. That's cool. But don't work too much, okay? Because you guys are more fun when you're home. It was a gentle reminder from a child who'd already lost one parent and knew, in the way kids understood things, that time was precious and finite and not to be wasted. Caleb and Ariana exchanged glances, both making silent promises to prioritize better, to remember that saving the world meant nothing if they lost each other in the process. The real test came in August. Ariana's mother, Victoria Locke, decided it was finally time to meet the man her daughter had moved in with. She arrived at their house on a Saturday afternoon in a chauffeured car, dressed like she was attending a society luncheon rather than visiting family. Caleb watched from the window as she emerged, all designer clothes and perfect hair and the kind of severe elegance that made him immediately want to stand at attention. She's not that scary, Ariana said, seeing his expression. Okay, she's terrifying, but she means well, mostly. Your mother has been on the cover of Vanity Fair. I patch people up in emergencies. We're going to have nothing to talk about. Talk about me. She loves hearing about how I'm finally settling down. Ariana squeezed his hand. And if she says anything about your background or your salary or implies that you're not good enough, I will personally throw her out of our house. Our house, Caleb. She's a guest. You belong here. Victoria Locke's first words upon entering were, "This is certainly cozy." She said cozy the way some people said diseased. Maddie, bless her, didn't pick up on the subtle disdain. Hi, I'm Maddie. Do you want to see my room? I have a telescope and everything. Victoria blinked, clearly not expecting to be immediately claimed by a 9-year-old. That's lovely, dear. Perhaps in a moment. Mom, this is Caleb, Ariana said, moving to stand beside him in a gesture of solidarity that didn't go unnoticed. Caleb, my mother. Victoria. Caleb extended his hand. Mrs. Locke, it's good to finally meet you. Victoria's handshake was brief, assessing. Her eyes took in everything, his appearance, his posture, the way he stood protectively close to her daughter. Whatever conclusions she drew, she kept them behind a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Mr. Shaw, Ariana has told me so much about you. Though I must say, hearing about someone and meeting them are quite different experiences. I imagine they are. Can I get you something to drink? Coffee, tea, water? Tea would be lovely if you have something other than grocery store brands. The lunch that followed was an exercise in diplomatic warfare. Victoria asked pointed questions disguised as polite conversation. How did Caleb plan to support his daughter on a foundation salary? Did he worry that Maddie might feel out of place in private schools? Was he comfortable with the kind of public scrutiny that came from dating someone in Ariana's position? Caleb answered each question with patient honesty, refusing to be baited into defensiveness. Yes, he made less than Ariana. No, he wasn't intimidated by her success. Yes, he worried about Maddie, but not because of money, because he worried about everything when it came to his daughter, same as any parent. It was Maddie who finally broke through Victoria's armor. The girl had been listening quietly, picking at her food, until Victoria made some comment about Caleb lacking the educational background typically found in Ariana's social circle. My daddy has medals, Maddie said, her voice small but firm, for saving people. He saved Miss Ariana's life, and he takes care of me all by himself since Mommy died, and he works really hard to help people every day. I think that's better than going to fancy schools. The table went silent. Victoria stared at this child who'd just called her out with the brutal honesty that only kids could deploy. Caleb looked ready to apologize. Ariana looked ready to applaud. Victoria set down her teacup carefully. You're quite right, Maddie. I apologize. That was unkind of me. She turned to Caleb, and for the first time her expression softened slightly. Ariana told me how you met, about the accident. I didn't thank you for that, for saving my daughter, for being there when she needed someone. Anyone with my training would have done the same, Caleb said. Perhaps, but you did do it, and then you did something harder. You let her into your life. Let her be part of your family. That takes a different kind of courage. Victoria glanced at her daughter. Ariana has always been so focused on her career, on building and achieving and proving herself. I worried she'd forgotten how to simply live. But looking at her now, here in this cozy house with you and Maddie, I think maybe she's finally learning. Ariana's eyes were suspiciously bright. Mom, I'm not saying I understand it. You could have married into established families, dated men with comparable fortunes and pedigrees, but you chose this man, this life. And while it's not what I would have chosen for you, Victoria paused, looking around the modest kitchen, at Maddie's artwork on the refrigerator, at the life her daughter had built from love rather than strategy. I can see that it makes you happy, real, genuine happy, and that's something I couldn't buy you with all the money in the world. It wasn't a ringing endorsement, but from Victoria Locke, it was practically a blessing. The rest of the visit passed more easily. Victoria even let Maddie show her the telescope and pretended to be interested in the constellations the girl had memorized. When she left, she hugged Ariana for a long moment, whispering something that made her daughter cry. What'd she say? Caleb asked after the car had driven away. That she's proud of me. Not for the company, or the money, or any of that. Just for being brave enough to choose love. Ariana wiped her eyes. She's never said that before. In 32 years, she's never just been proud of me for being me. Caleb pulled her close, letting her cry against his shoulder while Maddie patted her back sympathetically. They stood like that in the driveway, 3 people learning what family meant when you chose it, rather than inheriting it. The foundation's work continued to expand through the fall. They were invited to present at a national conference on emergency medicine, sharing their model with hospitals across the country. Caleb was nervous. Public speaking had never been his strength, but Ariana coached him through it, helping him understand that he wasn't there to perform, just to share what he knew. The presentation was scheduled for November, almost exactly a year after the accident that had brought them together. They stood backstage at the conference center, Caleb in a suit that Ariana had helped him pick out, both of them aware that this moment represented something bigger than just a presentation. You ready? Ariana asked. No, but I'm doing it anyway. That's my guy. She kissed him quickly. Go save the world with PowerPoint and practical knowledge. The presentation was a hit. Caleb's practical, no-nonsense approach resonated with the audience of medical professionals who were tired of theoretical solutions and desperate for things that actually worked. He told stories, the little boy with the allergy, the clinic that improved their response times by 40% after implementing their training, the lives that were saved not through dramatic intervention, but through better preparation and systems. And then, at the end, he told his own story. The night in the ER when a CEO nearly died. How one person with training had been able to make a difference. How that moment had sparked everything that came after. I was just a security guard, he said to the crowd. I wasn't supposed to be the hero. I was just supposed to walk the halls and check doors. But training and experience don't care about job titles. When someone needs help, you help them if you can. And then you figure out how to make sure the next person who needs help has even better support than you could provide alone. He gestured to where Ariana sat in the front row. The woman I saved that night? She saved me right back. Gave me an opportunity to use my skills on a bigger scale, to help build systems that would multiply my impact 1,000 times over. That's what we're doing at the Heart Foundation, taking the knowledge that exists in people like me, people who've been in the trenches, and scaling it up so everyone benefits. The applause was thunderous. People wanted to know more, wanted to implement their model, wanted to partner with the foundation. What had started as one position for one man had become a movement. That evening, at the hotel, Ariana and Caleb celebrated with room service and champagne. They sat on the balcony overlooking the city, tired but satisfied. You were amazing today, Ariana said. You had that entire room captivated. Do you realize what you've built? What we've built? Caleb corrected. I'm just the guy with the medical knowledge. You're the one who figured out how to turn it into something that actually helps people at scale. We're a good team. The best. He set down his glass, suddenly serious. Ariana, there's something I need to ask you. She turned to look at him, and her breath caught. Because Caleb was reaching into his pocket, and oh God, was he really? He pulled out a small box. Not a ring box, but close enough to make her heart race. I don't have a ring, he said, because I wanted to do this right. Wanted to ask you first before making any assumptions. But I need you to know, he took her hand, this year with you has been the happiest of my life since Sarah died. You've given me back pieces of myself I thought were gone forever. You've loved my daughter like she's yours. You've built a life with us that feels like home in a way nothing has since I lost my wife. Ariana's eyes were already swimming with tears. I know we said we'd take things slow. I know we agreed to be careful. But slow and careful doesn't change what I feel. Doesn't change the fact that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Want to make this official, permanent, real in every possible way. He opened the box. Inside was a simple silver bracelet with an inscription, Stay. It's what you asked me that night, Caleb said softly, when you were dying. Please, just make it fast. But I made it slow instead. Made you stay. Made you fight. And now I'm asking you to stay forever. Marry me, Ariana. Not because we're expected to, not because it makes sense on paper, but because I love you. Because you're my second chance at happiness, and I don't want to waste a single day of it. Ariana couldn't speak, could barely breathe. She looked at the bracelet, simple, meaningful, so perfectly them, and felt her heart crack open with joy. Yes, she managed. Yes, of course, yes. I'll marry you, I'll stay. Caleb slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, his hands shaking slightly. Then he kissed her, deep and sure and full of promise for all the tomorrows they'd build together. They didn't tell anyone right away. Flew home the next day and broke the news to Maddie first, because she deserved to be the first to know. The girl screamed with delight, jumping up and down, declaring that she'd known it all along, that she'd been hoping for this since the winter concert. Does this mean Miss Ariana will be my mom? Maddie asked, suddenly serious. Ariana knelt down to the girl's level. Only if you want me to be. I know I'm not your mommy. Your first mommy was special and irreplaceable. But I love you very much. And if you'd like, I'd be honored to be your second mom. The one who gets to help raise you and love you and embarrass you at school events. Can I call you Mom? You can call me whatever feels right. Mom, Ariana, Miss Ariana, hey you in the kitchen. Whatever makes you comfortable. Maddie thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Then she threw her arms around Ariana's neck. Mom, I want to call you Mom. Caleb watched his daughter embrace the woman he loved and felt something break open in his chest. Not grief this time, but pure, overwhelming gratitude. He'd loved Sarah with all his heart, and her loss had nearly destroyed him. But somehow, impossibly, he'd been given a second chance at building a family. Not a replacement, but a new beginning. A different kind of love, but no less real. They announced the engagement 2 weeks later at the Heart Foundation's board meeting. The response was unanimously positive. Even the board members who'd initially been skeptical about Ariana hiring her boyfriend had been won over by the measurable impact of their work. This wasn't a CEO playing favorites. This was a partnership that saved lives. The wedding planning was surprisingly simple. Neither of them wanted a huge production. They found a small venue with a garden, invited only people who genuinely mattered, and focused on making it meaningful rather than impressive. Maddie was the flower girl and took her job incredibly seriously, practicing her walk down the aisle for weeks. But before the wedding could happen, there was one more thing Caleb needed to do. On a cold Saturday in December, he took Maddie to the cemetery. They stood in front of Sarah's grave, the headstone simple and beautiful, marking the resting place of a woman who'd been taken too soon. Hi, Mommy, Maddie said softly, placing flowers on the grave. I miss you. Caleb knelt beside his daughter, his own flowers in hand. Hey, love, I have something to tell you. I'm getting married again. To Ariana, the woman I told you about before, the one I saved, who saved me right back. He felt foolish talking to a grave, but he needed to say it, needed to acknowledge that moving forward didn't mean forgetting. I love her, he continued. Not the same way I loved you. Nobody could replace you, Sarah. You were my first love, my first everything. You gave me Maddie, and that gift alone is worth more than anything else in this world. But I'm alive, and Maddie needs a mom, and I need a partner. And Ariana, she's good. She's kind. She loves our daughter like she's her own. Tears rolled down his face, and he didn't bother wiping them away. I hope you'd approve. Hope you'd be happy that I'm not drowning anymore. That I found someone who makes me remember what joy feels like. I'll always love you, but I need to live too. And Ariana makes me want to live. Maddie slipped her small hand into his. Mommy knows, Daddy. She wants you to be happy. She told me. She told you? In my dreams sometimes. She says she's proud of me for being brave. And she says she likes Miss Ariana. Mom Ariana. Maddie smiled through her own tears. She says you're allowed to love again, that it doesn't make you forget her. Caleb pulled his daughter close, holding her while they both cried, for loss and love and the messy, beautiful process of healing. When they finally left the cemetery, they felt lighter, like they'd been given permission to move forward without guilt. The wedding took place on a Saturday in March, exactly 18 months after the accident that had brought them together. The venue was small and intimate, decorated with simple flowers and candles. The guest list included Maddie's school friends, Caleb's army buddies who'd flown in from around the country, Ariana's board members, foundation staff, and both their families. Patricia Chen, the ER nurse who'd witnessed their first meeting, was there. Dr. Webb, too. Even some of the people they'd helped through the foundation's work, clinic directors, hospital administrators, families whose lives had been saved by better training and preparation. Maddie walked down the aisle first, scattering flower petals with elaborate precision. She wore a silver dress that matched the bracelet on Ariana's wrist, and a crown of flowers that made her look like a fairy princess. When she reached the front, she turned and gave her father a thumbs up that made the entire assembly laugh. Then came Ariana. She'd rejected the idea of a traditional wedding gown, instead choosing a simple ivory dress that was elegant without being ostentatious. She wore the bracelet Caleb had given her, along with a necklace that had been Sarah's. Caleb had offered it months ago, wanting her to have something from his first wife, wanting her to know she was welcomed into a family rather than replacing anyone. Caleb stood at the altar in his dress uniform, the medals on his chest catching the light. He'd resisted wearing it initially, uncomfortable with the display, but Ariana had insisted. Let people see who you are, she'd said, all of who you are. When she reached him, she took his hands, and they stood there looking at each other while the officiant spoke words about love and commitment and second chances. Caleb Shaw, Ariana said when it was time for vows. The night we met, I was convinced I was dying, and I asked you to make it fast, to let me go quickly rather than suffering through the fight. But you refused. You promised me sunrise, and you fought for every second, every breath. You taught me that life is worth fighting for, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. You've given me more than a second chance at life. You've given me a reason to live it, a daughter to love, a purpose to pursue, a home that feels like more than just expensive furniture and a good view. You've taught me that worth isn't measured in stock prices, but in lives touched, people helped, love given freely. I promise to spend the rest of my life fighting for you the way you fought for me, to make every day count, to never take for granted the gift of waking up beside you. Caleb had to clear his throat twice before he could speak. Ariana Locke, when I saved your life that night, I thought I was just doing my job, doing what I'd been trained to do. I never expected you to save me right back. But you did. You saw me, really saw me, when I was invisible to everyone else. You recognized that just because I'd settled for less didn't mean I deserved less. He glanced at Maddie, who was watching with rapt attention. You loved my daughter without hesitation. You walked into our messy, complicated life and made it better just by being in it. You reminded me that surviving isn't the same as living, and that it's okay to want more than just getting through each day. I promise to love you with everything I have, to build a life with you that honors both our past while reaching toward our future. to be your partner in every sense of the word, and to keep fighting for sunrise every single day. There wasn't a dry eye in the venue. The officiant pronounced them married, and when Caleb kissed his bride, Maddie cheered loud enough to make everyone laugh through their tears. At the reception, they did away with most traditional wedding elements. No formal dances or elaborate toasts. Just good food, good music, and people they loved celebrating with them. Caleb's army friends told increasingly embarrassing stories about his combat medic days. Ariana's board members seemed genuinely delighted to see their CEO so happy. Maddie appointed herself the official photographer, taking pictures of everything with the intensity that suggested a future career in journalism. The highlight came when Victoria Locke stood up, surprising everyone by asking for the microphone. She looked at her daughter and new son-in-law with an expression that was almost tender. "I won't pretend I understood this relationship at first," Victoria said. "My daughter could have married anyone, CEOs, politicians, men with family names and country club memberships. Instead, she chose a security guard who saved her life, and I thought she was being impulsive, romantic, foolish." She paused. "I was wrong. Caleb Shaw is worth 10 of the men I would have chosen for her. He's honorable, selfless, brave in ways that have nothing to do with medals and everything to do with character. He's given my daughter something I never could, the understanding that she's valuable as a person, not just as an asset, and he's given me a granddaughter I never knew I needed." Maddie waved from her seat. Victoria actually smiled. "So welcome to the family, Caleb. And Ariana, I'm proud of you. Not for the company or the foundation or any of that. I'm proud of you for having the courage to choose love over expectations, for building something real in a world that often values appearances over substance. May your marriage be long, happy, and filled with the kind of joy that comes from really knowing another person." The toast brought down the house. Even Caleb found himself tearing up because he'd won over not just Ariana, but her entire complicated family. As the evening wound down, Caleb, Ariana, and Maddie slipped away to the garden outside the venue. The March air was cool but not cold, carrying the scent of early spring flowers. They sat on a bench together, Maddie between them, all three tired but happy. "Best day ever," Maddie declared. "Agreed," Ariana said, resting her head on Caleb's shoulder. "Second best," Caleb corrected. "Best day was the day I met both of you." "You met us on different days, Daddy. That's 2 best days." "Then I have 3 best days. The night I met your mom, Ariana, the day you came to the foundation office and met her properly. And today. That's allowed, right? Multiple best days?" "I think when you're this happy, every day gets to be the best day," Ariana said softly. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge as the evening deepened. Inside, the party continued without them, but out here they had what mattered, each other, and the promise of all the tomorrows they'd build together. 6 months later, the Hart Foundation hosted the opening of its biggest project yet. The Shaw Center for Community Healing, named not after Caleb but after Sarah, because, as Ariana explained, she gave us you. This should honor her memory. Caleb had cried when she told him, then agreed immediately. The center was everything they'd dreamed of. A free clinic staffed by trained medical professionals, a training facility for emergency response, a community space where people could learn CPR, first aid, basic medical care, a memorial wall honoring first responders and combat medics who'd given their lives in service to others. Sarah Shaw's name was first on that wall. The grand opening drew massive crowds, press coverage, government officials, families who'd been helped by the foundation's work. But the moment that mattered most came when a Vietnam veteran in a wheelchair approached Caleb. "Son," the old man said, "I heard what you're doing here, teaching people to save lives, honoring the medics who came before. This means something, more than you know." "I know, sir. I've been where you are, seen what you've seen. This is for all of us who couldn't save everyone but never stopped trying." The veteran saluted. Caleb saluted back. It was a moment of recognition, respect, and shared understanding that transcended words. At the podium during the opening ceremony, Ariana prepared to give a speech. But before she could start, she looked at Caleb and changed her mind. "I had a whole speech written," she told the crowd, "about systems and impact and measurable outcomes. But you know what? That's not what this is really about. This center exists because one night, a man I'd never met refused to let me die. He fought for me when I'd given up on myself, and then he taught me what it meant to fight for others. She gestured for Caleb to join her at the podium. He looked reluctant, but Maddie gave him a push from where she stood in the front row. "This is Caleb Shaw," Ariana continued as he stood beside her. "My husband, my partner, the man who saved my life and then helped me figure out what to do with it. The Shaw Center isn't named after him because he didn't want the attention, but everyone here should know. This exists because of his vision, his expertise, his refusal to accept that good people should die just because help wasn't available or trained enough." She turned to face him directly. "You told me once to stop measuring worth by what I can take and start measuring it by what I can give. This center is us giving back, giving forward, making sure that the next person who's dying on an ER floor has someone with your skills to fight for them, making sure that no one has to die because help wasn't trained enough or equipped enough or brave enough." Caleb took the microphone, his hands shaking slightly. "I'm not good at speeches. I'm better at action. But I'll say this. Every person in this building right now has the capacity to save a life. Maybe not with surgery or advanced medicine, but with knowledge, with preparation, with the willingness to act when someone needs help. This center is about empowering all of us to be the help we wish we'd had in our darkest moments." He looked out at the crowd, saw Patricia Chen dabbing her eyes, saw his army buddies nodding in recognition, saw families who'd benefited from the foundation's work. "We named this after my late wife, Sarah, because she understood something essential, that the best way to honor the people we've lost is to help the people who remain. She would have loved this, loved knowing that her memory was tied to something that saves lives rather than just commemorating death." Maddie joined them on stage then, carefully carrying a small velvet box. Inside was a medal, custom-made, inscribed with words that had started everything. "Please, don't make it fast. Stay." "This is for you," Ariana said to Caleb, pinning it to his jacket, "for refusing to let me quit, for fighting for every second, for teaching me what it means to really live." The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, but Caleb only saw Ariana's face, Maddie's proud smile, and the building behind them that represented everything they'd built from tragedy and second chances. That evening, after the crowds had dispersed and the press had left, the three of them walked through the empty center. Maddie ran ahead, exploring rooms and imagining all the people who'd be helped here. Caleb and Ariana followed slowly, hand in hand. "We did it," Caleb said. "Built something that matters." "We did. And we'll keep building, keep helping, keep fighting for every sunrise." Ariana squeezed his hand. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not making it fast. For making me stay. For showing me that life is worth fighting for, even when it's hard." She smiled. "Especially when it's hard." They stood in the center's main hall, surrounded by state-of-the-art medical equipment and training facilities, beneath a skylight that let in the last rays of evening sun. The same sun that had risen on Ariana's first morning after the accident, the sunrise Caleb had promised when she was begging to die. "You know what the best part is?" Ariana asked. "What?" "This isn't the ending, it's just the beginning. We have years ahead of us, decades, if we're lucky. And we get to spend them together, building things that matter, raising our daughter, loving each other through all the complicated, messy, beautiful moments that make up a life." Caleb pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "I used to think I'd used up my allotment of happiness, that I'd had my chance with Sarah, and that was it. But then you nearly died on an ER floor, and I couldn't help myself. I had to save you, had to fight for you, and somehow, in saving you, I saved myself too." "We saved each other," Ariana corrected. "That's how this works. That's how love works. Not one person rescuing another, but both of them choosing, every single day, to fight for each other and the life they're building together." Maddie's voice echoed from somewhere deeper in the building, calling for them to come see something she'd found. They smiled and went to find their daughter, their footsteps echoing in the space they'd built from grief and hope and the stubborn refusal to let trauma have the last word. Outside, the sun set completely, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. And then, inevitably, beautifully, it prepared to rise again. Because that's what it did. That's what they all did. Survived the dark, held on through the impossible, and waited for the sunrise that always, eventually, came. Years later, when people asked how they'd built the Shaw Center, how they'd created a foundation that saved thousands of lives, Caleb and Ariana would tell them the truth. It started with a promise made in the worst possible moment, a promise to make it slow, to fight for every second, to never give up, even when giving up felt like mercy. It started with refusing to let someone die. And then it became about teaching everyone how to choose life, again and again, no matter how hard it got. It started with one security guard, one dying CEO, and one little girl who needed both of them. It started with love, messy, complicated, transformative love that didn't fix everything but made everything worth fighting for. It started with sunrise, and it would continue as long as they kept choosing to stay, to fight, to love. As long as they kept their promises to each other and to everyone who needed someone to believe that another day was worth having. The Shaw Center's motto, carved above the entrance for everyone to see, said it all. Every second matters, every life counts. Never make it fast when you can make it last. And underneath, in smaller letters, in memory of Sarah Shaw, in honor of all who choose to stay. The story that began with a woman begging to die ended with 3 people teaching the world how to live. And that, more than any ending, felt like the right place to rest.